Don't go chasing waterfalls, lakes that you used to. Gonna have it your way or nothing at all.
I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati. I'm your host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Tuesday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. I hope you guys had a really good Memorial Day weekend, despite some of the news, but I hope you got to have some time with family and friends. But welcome back, guys. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me on Thursdays there for the Sabby and JB show. In fact, this Thursday, JB and I are going to be talking to Garland Nixon. Don't miss that. That's going to be awesome, I think. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And what's up, fam? What's going on? I know it's been a crazy weekend considering a lot of the news that happened over the weekend. I actually would have been live this past Sunday, but I wasn't because I had plans for Memorial Day weekend. I hope you guys got to do some fun things. I went to a music festival. And I don't know about you guys, but I love live music and I love the summertime here because there's a lot of music festivals that happen during the summer and everybody comes out of their cave, so to speak, here in New England. And everybody's like, sunshine, and it's sunny and it's warm and everyone comes out. So I actually went to Boston Calling. I've been there a couple of times, but it was the headliners this time was Hosier, The Killers, and Meg the Stallion, along with, there are other smaller bands that play as well. But Boston Calling is probably one of the best music festivals that I've been to just because there's 4 stages. It's in the Harvard Athletic Complex outside, and there's different artists on each stage. And particularly they time it just right so that you're not going to obviously miss one of the headliners. So there's not going to be a small band playing while one of the headliners are playing. But it was awesome. It was hot. Okay. It was hot. It's weird. Like the weather, it said it was like 76 degrees, but it felt so much hotter because there's no shade there. So the sun is just like beaming down on you. So I saw some people definitely not hydrated, but I had a blast. Quick shout out to Hosier. Actually, he gave a shout out to Palestine. He was the only headliner that I saw give a shout out to Palestine on the stage. And I guess it makes sense when you think about where Hosier comes from, right? He's from Ireland. So he is very much familiar with what it is like to deal with occupation. But we're back. We are back. Let's go ahead and start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat. What's going on? Miguel says, peace. What's up, Miguel? Greetings, David. Sabby, the reason why Ireland supports Palestine is because they were occupied themselves in the 1590. Then the nail and the coffin was after the Battle of Kinsale in 1601. There you go. What's going on? CBC voter says, happy Tuesday at Sabby Sabs. Shout out to Tim. No one vote for Genocide Joe. His pink line of Israel invaded Rafah was a lie, per usual. Vote Jill Stein and tear this whole system down. It's disgusting. Poor babies, pack your shit, Joe. I hear you there. Andre, what's going on? Happy Tuesday, Sabby. Not to be the dead horse, but why can't we demand Biden resign, regardless of if we are voting third party or not? Biden is aiding and abetting a war criminal. That is a good point there, Andre. I mean, I think people can also demand that Joe Biden resigns. I think the only thing that comes with that is who is next in line, right? So who's next in line after Joe Biden? That would be Kamala Harris. She's not going to do anything differently than what Joe Biden's already doing currently when it comes to foreign policy. But I totally get where you're coming from. That's another demand that could be added as well. Shout out to Third Rail. I love you, sister, for your honesty and integrity. Well, thank you so much. Greetings, Lawrence says Rashida comes late to the party. We will get into that, Lawrence. We'll get into it. Shout out to Hannah says, what Rashida doing now? I gotta see this. We'll get there. We'll get there. What's up, Lorez says, sup, Sab, Eric, Corey, and RBN fam. So much new news nowadays. Rashida voted mostly with Dem establishment, then goes against because Israel policy personally affects her. Hypocrite. Smash the like. Ooh, we have a lot to discuss, Lorez. We have a lot to discuss. What's going on? Desmond says, why did the Libertarian choose that guy? That is a good question. You guys are already starting off right out the gate with good questions. That's a good question, Desmond. We'll get into what happened at the Libertarian Party convention. Very interesting time. Interesting time. What's going on? Mark says, Sabby. Shout out to Gup1 says, sabbysabs.substack.com. Yes. I know a lot of you say you're not getting like YouTube notifications. Neither do I. I don't get YouTube notifications for other channels as well. That's why I do have my Substack. So if you sign up for my Substack, all you do is just enter your email address. You will get alerts every time I go live. So that's probably how a lot of people know that I'm going live, because they get that email message that says live stream alert. What's going on? Red 6 says, hello, Sabby. Shout out to Zero Joshua. Rich man's war, vulnerable population's blood. We are not the hungry men that rule our leaders. Interesting. Interesting. Greetings, Randy says, good evening, Sabby family. Shout out to Julia says, sing it, Sabby. I was watching the TLC documentary. So there's a new TLC documentary on Netflix. And so I haven't finished it yet, but I'm at the part where they start talking about creating the video for Waterfalls, the song Waterfalls, and like, that was my jam. So the song's kind of stuck in my head there. Greetings, Shando Khan says, hello from the Bahamas. I've never been to the Bahamas, but I have seen pictures and the water looks very beautiful. Very beautiful. Shout out to Nikki's World says, hello, Sabrina and everyone. Greetings, Jacqueline says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Kill Your Groger says, you know, it's Taco Tuesday, so hit the like. It is. I had a bad taco this weekend. And you guys tell me if this is even possible. I didn't think it was possible to screw up tacos. I mean, it's one of the easiest things that you can make. But I was at a brewery and they had food. And I guess you can't do everything right. You know, the beer was great. The food was meh, meh. But I decided to get the tacos. And the tacos were like, how do you cook the shell into the rest of the ingredients inside the taco? Like, how do you do that? And then the tacos were just swimming in a pool of grease. I'm like, what is this? How can you mess up a taco? You guys been with me for a while. You know how I feel about tacos. You know how I feel. Shout out to Ali says, hello, pro peace people. Greetings. P. Smith says, hello from Albuquerque, also known as the land of Breaking Bad. What's up? Shout out to Pravda says, is this a premiere? No, this is live. I am live in action with you. Premieres will always say premiere at the bottom of the video. And not live. Shout out to Leroy says, good day, everyone. Tap the like for a real one. Shout out to Steve says, hello, everybody. Greetings, Ziva. Good evening from the Amazon jungle. Hi, Sabby fam. Give Sabby a thumbs up, folks. What is it like in the Amazon? Never been. I don't know. I heard it's humid. What's up, Fuwa Chan says, hi, Sabby. Love your work. Keep it up. Thank you. Greetings, Carrie Scott. If we get U.S. citizen-owned utilities and resources, we can end poverty and fix reparations now. I agree with you. Shout out to April. I made it through the storms in Dallas, Texas. I'm so thankful. I heard there was a lot of crazy things that happened this weekend. I don't know. New Sheep says, but without you all, I'm going to be as... Oh, the Backstreet song. But without you, all I'm going to be is incomplete. Oh, man. I see the audience. The audience loves music. And shout out to Joey Peltier says, booze who folks. All right. All right. Let's get started. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. Really do appreciate you around here. Again, you're keeping all the lights on around me. Thank you so much for being Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: ultimate, Sabinators. There's also Sabsters in the house. And of course, Sabbies. I see a lot of discussion in the chat about tacos. You can't mess up tacos, man. I didn't think that was possible. And of course, members. Thank you guys so much for your support. Kudos. All right. Oh, it looks like I have another tab open. I forgot to close. Okay, there we go. All right, guys, what are we discussing tonight? And I hope everybody likes tacos too, because I sure as hell do. You know, I never get tired of tacos. This is why some people said, like, I should have been living on the West Coast because I love tacos so much. And I've also been told that I haven't had a real authentic taco unless I've had it from like California or, of course, like Mexico. So there. Troy said, growing up Mexican, don't mess with my tacos. LOL. Yeah, like how you mess up tacos, son? How you mess up tacos? Tacos and cheeks. Oh my God. All right. What are we discussing tonight? Let's get into it. Glenn Greenwald destroys Alan Dershowitz. And I say destroys, and I'm not exaggerating, because Glenn really took Alan Dershowitz to task there during this debate that I think you guys are going to find very interesting. Glenn definitely came prepared as usual. I don't think people come into these debates prepared. I think they underestimate some of the people like Glenn Greenwald. We're also going to discuss RFK and Trump Libertarian fail. What in the hell happened at the Libertarian convention this weekend? We're going to get into all of that jazz and how some people got their hopes up and how hopes were smashed. We will get into that. We're also going to discuss Rashida Tlaib drops Biden. There was another event that happened as well over the weekend. That was the Palestine event in Detroit, Michigan. And Rashida Tlaib was one of the speakers there. And you're going to hear what she had to say as we're going into or getting close to November. And last but not least, Israel attacks Rafah camp. So you'll see the picture of Netanyahu there. Unfortunately, yes, over Memorial Weekend, this did happen. More civilian lives have been cost in Rafah. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And it's really sad. It is really sad. And we're also going to get into the Ohio ballot measure results for 2023. So let's get started. I want to get started with this first story coming out of Detroit, Michigan. So if you guys remember, there was an uncommitted campaign against Joe Biden, and this was during the Democrat primary. So Arab voters in Detroit in actually the Dearborn, Michigan area, they decided to vote uncommitted for the Democrat primary instead of voting for Joe Biden or any of the other Democrat candidates to send a strong message to Joe Biden. And I said back then that if we're going to have a serious uncommitted campaign, it needs to go through November. You can't just do it for the Dem primary. Well, now it looks as though that is the case. Now, we're going to talk about the pros and cons about this. But recently, Rashida Tlaib actually spoke at an event. It was called the People's Conference for Palestine event in Detroit, where she is speaking to, of course, the Arab voting community and taking this uncommitted campaign a step further going into November. Again, we're going to talk about the pros and the cons about this, and I'm going to tell you what else they could be doing that would actually be even more effective. So let's go ahead and get started with this speech here from Rashida.
Surprise guest, something that we weren't expecting, but you all know what state we're in and what city we're in, yes? Detroit, Michigan. And so we will be joined by Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib.
Also, shout out to Breakthrough News and at the Stu Studio for covering this. Want to make sure I give credit where it's due.
Palestini or welcome to Detroit. We'll end with welcome to Detroit, but thank you all so much. Y'all, welcome. Welcome to the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, the city of Detroit. I don't know if I need to remind you all, but Detroit, we birth movements, not just labor movements. We birth movements on environmental justice, on women's rights, and so much more. So welcome. Gain strength from this amazing, beautiful black city that raised me.
So I was actually surprised that she referenced it that way as the black city. It was pretty interesting.
You will always, every single one of you fighting for the liberation of Palestine will always be welcome in my city. Detroit's known this for a long time, what the Palestinian people have been saying for a long, long time. The Nakba never ended. 1.7 Palestinians, nearly 3/4 of Gaza's population have been displaced. I don't even like saying it like that. Forcibly removed. They are using the weapon of starvation. They are literally allowing children to starve to death with our money. We know the atrocities being committed by the apartheid government of Israel are horrific and well documented. You know, I didn't have to wait for the Guardian investigation to tell us what they found, which is that Israeli snipers have been deliberately targeting children. Doctor after doctor has come to my office showing me images of 6, 7, 8-year-old children with bullet holes in their skulls. Many of them showing me images of literally white phosphorus burning the flesh of their children's skin off. Things they have never seen in their entire medical lives. They told me we've done medical missions all over the world. This is something they have never, ever seen before. We all know and feel it. And I know I feel so much guilt. I think we all do. Their lives and the futures have been stolen. many of them clinging to each other as they are being bombed in their beds, buried under rubble, still holding on to each other. All across Gaza, the medical system has been deliberately destroyed. That's a war crime. Well over 100 journalists have been murdered for reporting on the apartheid government, Israel's government's crimes against humanity. Again, targeting journalists, war crimes. In the past few weeks, myself and so many people on my team, we've been watching the multiple mass graves being uncovered, several locations where the Israeli government forces have been withdrawing from. Over 390 bodies have been discovered at Al-Nasser, Al-Shifa hospitals, including women and children.
Let me just answer this really quick. A good question here. Stag Party is your party. Why murder a journalist? To stop the spread of information that you don't want getting out, to stop that type of narrative. That's why they're killing journalists. That's also why they tried to remove Al Jazeera from Israel as well.
Showing signs of torture, execution, and being buried alive. Just imagine. War crimes. President Biden, I hope you hear us loud and clear. Attacking the authority of the International Criminal Court and interfering in the legal process is nothing more than an attempt to prevent the genocidal maniac Netanyahu and his senior Israeli officials from being held accountable for those crimes against humanity. You are an enabler, President Biden.
So let me chime in here for just a second and we'll get back to the speech. Okay. I will say I appreciate that she's calling out the fact that Joe Biden is enabling this. But one thing you have to keep in mind as well, Rashida Tlaib, there's been a number of times where she has kind of flip-flopped on issues. And I'll bring up one that it kind of relates to particularly the policing movement, right? So defund the police. Some of you may not remember, but Rashida Tlaib actually was in favor of defunding the police during the BLM movement. She spoke in favor of that. She said, yes, we got to stand with, the protesters, et cetera. Yes, the police are an issue. But as time went by and she was in Congress longer, she backed away from defunding the police. You don't hear her talk about that the way that she used to. She wasn't alone. Other squad members have also walked away from defunding the police. So just FYI, I think the only person who still talks about it now is Cori Bush. And remember, I told you last year, they actually had silenced her team because she was still talking about defund the police. So the reason why I don't get excited about this, about Rashida Tlaib speaking about it, is not because number one, she's spoken about this issue before, way before October 7th. She has been vocal about this issue. This is her community. These are her people. They are directly affected. But it's kind of strange to me that if you're really this pissed at Joe Biden, instead of just having an uncommitted movement, why not move those people into a third party? Why not move those people towards one of the third party or independent candidates that is actually correct on this issue? And so until I see Rashida Tlaib trying to organize people to get behind the candidates that actually are speaking out against this and have been speaking out against this for years, I'm talking about people who have a track record of calling out Israel's atrocities and what has been happening to the Palestinian people. I have a question mark and it gives me pause because uncommitted. Okay, uncommitted. So we get into November and you decide uncommitted and you're not going to support Joe Biden. Totally cool. I'm not supporting Joe Biden either. But why not use that energy and move those people away from the duopoly? That's what I would do. If I was in that position, that's exactly, I do it through the show. But if I was in Rashida Tlaib's position, that is what I would be doing. What is the next step? Where do people go from here? So that's one of the things that I have to say about this uncommitted movement.
The International Court of Justice just ruled that the Israeli government must stop its invasion of Rafah. But President Biden says what's happening in Gaza is not a genocide. Where's your red line, President Biden? This is not even consistent with his own views on international law in the past, where he sit there and called and said Putin must be held accountable at the ICC. But he shields the murderous war criminal Netanyahu and the Israeli government official. They are asking us not to believe our own eyes. Each year, our country, and I say our country because it is our country, sends billions of dollars to maintain an apartheid government and support the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestinians.
And even knowing that, and Rashida has known this from day one since she's been in the Democratic Party, and even knowing that, Rashida Tlaib still refuses to leave the Democratic Party. She is censured. Remember, they censured her in Congress, right? So remember, during that censor hearing, you have to remember that there were even Democrat politicians that voted to censure Rashida Tlaib. So that is why I always want you, and I don't want to sound like a Debbie Downer. I'm not trying to bust your bubble. I just want you to look outside of the bubble, so to speak, right? I want you to pay close attention to what someone says versus what they actually do. Rashida Tlaib can leave the Democratic Party today. Kyrsten Sinema left the Democratic Party while she was still in the Senate. She said, yeah, I'm not going to be Democrat anymore. I'm just going to be an independent. She can leave the Democratic Party today. And since she has such large support from her community, I would argue that she could still win re-election as an independent candidate or as a third party candidate because she has the base to back her. So the question that you need to ask yourself, why is Rashida Tlaib still a part of the Democratic Party? Yet this is the party that she is chastising right now because of what is happening to her very own people. So we have to pay attention to their actions, not just what they say.
You all, every single bullet, every single gun, every single weapon, bombs that we send is a sacrifice of our own schools here at home. Many of which, when I go into the schools, have garbage bags over their drinking fountains because they don't have clean water. Every single bomb and bullet and weapons we send to genocide is less money to house the unhoused. When many of the veterans we send to support endless wars based on lies come back literally needing health care and nowhere to go, but we'll send weapons like this for genocide. When I tell my colleagues, we gotta fight for clean air and clean water, who's gonna pay for it? How about we stop supporting genocide and supporting endless wars? I know you all have heard me. Many of my colleagues come whispering to me, I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you said that. Why are you whispering? Well, Rashida, you know, I don't support Netanyahu. Well, you just send him $14 billion. No conditions, nothing. When I watch my colleagues, one by one, voting yes to send $14 billion to the apartheid regime, those committing genocide, all I kept thinking about is that us, the United States, is the primary investor and funder of genocide. We're literally co-conspirators.
And to that point about the genocide point, I just want to add this. It's not just Gaza. It's also the Congo. It's also Sudan. And we're going to actually there will be a gentleman on the show, not this week, I think it's next week, to explain the conflict in Sudan and what's happening there. But the U.S. government is behind all of that. The Congo, Sudan. So it's not just Gaza.
It's shameful. It's shameful when I come back to my district and I hear my seniors tell me, Rashida, when are we going to get an increase in Social Security? and they turn around and turn that TV on and see that we send billions and billions of dollars to literally slaughter children, families, their fathers, their grandparents, their aunts. But wait, you know when my colleagues are outraged? They're outraged over the protest on college campuses in our country. They're more outraged than that, than the atrocities happening right now on the ground in Palestine, the war crimes. Y'all, there's no universities in Gaza. We all know this. We say it over and over again. And now, if they get their way, they're going to silence the universities here at home. It is appalling to witness the crackdown and violent repression of First Amendment protected speech and assembly on college campuses around the country. I just left Wayne State University's student encampment. My alma mater. That's the school that I graduated from. You know, students are putting their bodies on the line to demand an end to this genocide, to demand that their universities divest. And it did not start today. They've been talking about divestment for years.
Let me pause for a second because there's a couple comments I want to address. I'm so glad that you guys are seeing through this, right? I'm so proud of you guys. Truth Hurts says something off about Tlaib. Les says she's just telling the audience what they want to hear. And then I want to bring up this comment here from Be Easy because this speaks to a point that I've noticed about a lot of politicians in Congress. Be Easy said, would she make the same speech about Haiti? And that is a good question, because what I've learned over time is that a lot of these politicians, they speak to the needs of the people in their district, in their community. So who is in Rashida Tlaib's community, right? So she said this before, and we've talked about this, largest Arab population in the United States, right? She's also Palestinian herself, so she's speaking to the needs of her constituents. We've seen AOC do this as well. I don't think AOC really speaks passionately about Haiti either, but she speaks to the needs of the people that are in her district, the population of people that are there. Remember, AOC came out against reparations for descendants of slavery. Everybody remember this. I showed the article, the interview that she had. I showed that article on the show last year. So everyone's got to remember these things. This is what they do. So when people say they're a squad, they're supposed to be voting as a block. Remember when Cori Bush said, when we vote alone. We vote for what our district, what our community, like those people actually want and things like that. So that is a really good point. Yeah, everyone should be talking about these issues. Everyone should be talking about this, whether it's Haiti, whether it's Congo, whether it's Sudan, everyone should be talking about it. But again, what Rashida Tlaib is showing you is that most of the time people speak to and they're more passionate about things that affect them directly. And that includes their constituents. So that goes back to what I said before about her walking away from defund the police, which whether you agree with that or not, that was an issue that she was in support of. And as time went by, she walked away from it. So pay attention to that.
They're demanding their university divest from the same weapons and manufacturers that are sending the bombs to murder innocent children in Gaza and their families, to bomb literally hospital after hospital, targeting and killing journalists. But I want you all to think for a minute. Why are our universities invested in weapons in war in the first place? Why?
So she's talking about investing in weapons for war, but let's go ahead and change the countries, okay? Let's pretend that we're not talking about Israel. We're not talking about Gaza. Let's say we're talking about Russia and Ukraine. Let's think about the way that politicians voted, including people like Rashida Tlaib, voted to send more funding, more weapons to Ukraine. So this is where some of the hypocrisy comes in, because people are like, and we'll get to Elizabeth Warren later. We'll get to Elizabeth Warren later in the show, because some of the same people speaking out against the weapons that are being sent to Gaza, which everyone should speak out against that, some of those same politicians voted to send weapons to Ukraine. So, you know,
why are these universities sending militarized police after their students to protect those investments in war. They are literally spraying them with chemicals for saying, save lives. It is disgraceful that the Biden administration and my colleagues in Congress continue to smear them for protesting to save lives, no matter faith or ethnicity. It is cowardly. But we're not going to forget in November, are we? I want you all to know, and I've said this before, it is hard being there. You know, it's hard being in Congress when you see them using racist tropes to describe those that are saying Palestinians deserve to live. Hateful, racist tropes about why we're standing up and saying enough. But I proudly hang the Palestinian flag in front of my congressional office.
And by the way, those comments are also made by politicians that are in the Democratic Party as well. There's also Democrats that heavily support Israel. In fact, a lot of them. They've also made some pretty cringe comments about the Palestinian people. But again, Rashida chooses to remain in that party.
I don't need to tell you that you're on the right side. I don't need to. But I'll be damned if I wait 10 years before they apologize to all of you for doing what was right at this moment. You know, mashallah, I am the eldest of 14 children. Say mashallah. And I can tell you, from when I was 12 years old, transiting from my mom, and when people said stupid things to her and I would go off on them, she'd say to me, Yamma lesh? Lesh iti al-wahida btsawi li mashakil. She'll say, Mom, why, dear? Why are you, out of all the kids, cause me trouble? Because you had to meet my grandparents. You had to. There's nothing like a Palestinian city. Nothing.
We're just going to speed up here just a little bit, right about there. There we go.
If my city was here, wallahi, first of all, she would try to cook for all of you. If my city was here, she'd tell you all it shouldn't be controversial to say stop the genocide. She'd always say to me, ليش يا ستي بيعملوا هيك? Why are they doing this to us? And how do you tell a woman? It's because your mere existence is the threat. And so I proudly walk as a Palestinian American woman, the granddaughter of Siti Muftiya Siti Shama, on that house floor, unapologetic. And sometimes it's hard, but being in space with all of you, it reminds me of what my beautiful, incredible Black city reminded me, always, always. They remind me when I got censured, no one's allowed to tell you shut up but us, Rashida.
Okay, let's go ahead and stop it there, because I have some things to say, and then I have 2 more clips that I want to show you as well. So until you see Rashida Tlaib leave the Democratic Party, hold your breath. And I say that because as long as she is still in the party, guys, she is still in line with the Biden administration. And that's why I'm telling you not to buy it. That's how electoral politics works. She's still going along with what Dem leadership wants. Hakeem Jeffries, like, it's not just Joe Biden, but also the minority leader of the House. So as long as if she was serious, she would walk away from the Democratic Party. She was really trying to make a strong change. It wouldn't just be about voting uncommitted. It would be about her leaving the Democratic Party to make a serious message towards Joe Biden and organizing with her community as well. Then, because like I said, it's not enough just to be uncommitted. Then you gather those people who are uncommitted and you get them to change and shake up this freaking electoral system. And you do that by you getting them to vote for one of the third party or independent candidates, whether it's Jill Stein or Cornel West, that come correct on this issue. Until I see you moving in that kind of way, I just, these are just speeches to me. It's just a speech, because I always ask you guys, what is the next step? What is the end game? Because just saying I'm not going to vote for Joe Biden in November if he doesn't stop this, how does that truly shake up the two-party system if you're not moving those people towards something that actually is coming correct on this issue? And I don't see her doing that. I don't see Rashida Tlaib trying to have some type of coalition with Jill Stein or Dr. Cornel West when it comes to this issue. I don't see that happening. She's still within the party, folks. Don't fall for it. And as long as she's still in the party, she's still going to walk those party lines. I wouldn't be surprised if she already received approval to speak at this event from Dem leadership. That's how this works. So we have to be very cautious here. We have to be very cautious. And again, to that point that Be Easy brought up, remember, they usually speak out and come out and fight for the issues that directly affect them. And that is what you are seeing that's happening. But Rashida Tlaib, we have known her before to flip-flop and to walk back on some of these positions when too much heat comes her way. And if you were all in, and I mean 100% all in, you would exit the party along with it. You wouldn't still stay in the party. Get out of here. Kirsten Sinema left the party while she's still in the Senate. She was like, yeah, I don't want to do this anymore. Bye. I'm now independent. Rashida Tlaib could do the same thing. So why is she still in the party? Got to ask yourself those questions. And we'll have to wait and see what happens in November. We'll have to wait and see. She's made those threats towards Joe Biden, but we'll have to wait and see if she sticks with that and she fully decides, no, we're not going to vote for him. And then, like I said, and then what? Is she going to push those people towards if Rashida Tlaib really wants this to end, if she really wants someone in there that is not going to support the state of Israel the way that the Democrat establishment is and the way that the GOP is, why isn't Rashida Tlaib trying to push her constituents to leave the Democratic Party and support the candidates or one of the candidates that supports the Palestinian determination? How has she not done this yet? Guys, wake up, look around you. Look around you. You have people, even Crystal and Kyle, who are Democrats and continue to push and support the Democratic Party. Even they already endorsed Jill Stein. So now we'll have to wait and see what happens in November. But they already endorsed Jill Stein publicly. And Rashida's still in the Democratic Party. Now, to this point, though, you know what happened this weekend. Joe Biden does not have a red line. I told you he really did not have a red line. And the State Department is getting a lot of heat on this. And that's why I said this would be the perfect time to push her constituents towards one of the candidates outside of the duopoly. And I want you to see this reporter is questioning John Kirby here. This just shows you how things are shaking up. This is the moment, guys.
So how does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation. We haven't seen that at this point.
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see a single more innocent life taken. And I kind of take a little offense at the question. No civilian casualties is the right number of civilian casualties. And this is not something that we've turned a blind eye to, nor has it been something we've ignored or neglected to raise with our Israeli counterparts, including, Ed, this weekend as a result of this particular strike. Now, they're investigating it, so let's let them investigate it and see what they come up with.
But the president doesn't have like a personal limit to this?
The president has been very clear and very direct about what our expectations are for Israeli operations in Rafah specifically, but in Gaza writ large. We don't support, we won't support a major ground operation in Rafah. And we've, again, been very consistent on that. And the president said that should that occur, then it might make him have to make different decisions in terms of support. We haven't seen that happen at this point.
Why not have him?
But you do support the operation as long as you are supplying the weapons. You do absolutely support it. So you guys see what's happening? We have journalists constantly pushing back on the State Department. Now is really the time to get enough people to walk away from the two-party system.
Come out and say that himself.
The president has been speaking to leaders throughout the region on a regular basis. He has been addressing you guys in various fora. You've got plenty of opportunities to talk to the president, including, I might add, in a press conference last week.
Okay, so there's that one. And then there's one more. Again, to push on the point about Rashida Tlaib not making the ask big enough. And I've been really serious about this when it comes to organizing. So we have another reporter is also questioning John Kirby here. And John Kirby gets a little frustrated and basically starts talking about how this is not Tel Aviv. Listen to this.
Yeah, I know you said tanks are moving along the corridor, but we are seeing tanks in Rafah. We've now seen strikes continue to kill civilians, including children.
Yeah.
Just for, an average American who's watching their taxpayer dollars go to this, can you explain to them how this isn't a major military operation? Or just maybe it would help to explain what is a major ground operation when it comes to the Biden administration.
John, I already did that, but I'm happy to do it again. Now, first of all, I am not the IDF spokesman, and this is not Tel Aviv.
First of all, yes, you are. And yes, it is. Because the U.S. government is doing whatever Israel tells them to do. Instead of the U.S. government making demands towards Israel and withholding weapons, the U.S. government is doing exactly what Israel wants them to do. So, yeah. I will say you are the spokesperson for the IDF, John Kirby. And yeah, I will say that it is Tel Aviv. When you have an organization like AIPAC that owns most of the politicians in freaking Congress, I would say that it is. When you have all these politicians going around telling people that Israel has a right to defend itself, but apparently nobody else does, I would say that it is. When you have a genocidal maniac whose administration is constantly killing civilians and thousands of children who have nothing to do with this conflict at all, and you go along with it, I would say you are very much controlled. And that reporter had every right to question you the way that he did.
This is the White House press briefing room. And I am not, today or any other day, going to take it upon myself to speak to Israeli military operations, the planning, the intent, and the tactics that they're using. You should be asking Admiral Hagari that question. He's the IDF spokesman, not me. What I will tell you is that what we have seen is essentially, so far, what the Israelis said they were going to do. They were going to close down the crossing to shut off the revenue to Hamas that comes across that crossing, at least for a while. And they were going to go after Hamas terrorists in as precise a way as possible, that they were not going to, quote unquote, smash into Rafah with a lot of ground forces. As you and I speak here today, that is still the case. We have not seen them smash into Rafah. We have not seen them go in with large units, large numbers of troops, in columns and formations, in some sort of coordinated maneuver against multiple targets on the ground. That is a major ground operation. We have not seen that.
So you see what they're trying to do now? Now they're trying to basically say that it has to be, this ground formation. There has to be thousands in a military lines and all this kind of stuff in order for that to pass. Listen, the U.S. government is full of it. John Kirby's full of it. A lot of these people, they're all bought and paid for. And I will add this part as well. If Rashida Tlaib is actually serious about sending a strong message to Joe Biden, what Rashida Tlaib should be doing is organizing her constituents to vote outside of the duopoly and vote for one of the candidates that actually cares about the Palestinian people and is not afraid to speak up against the state of Israel. That's what Rashida Tlaib would be doing. Rashida Tlaib would be leaving the Democratic Party to make that even more fierce. Rashida Tlaib is trying to hold your hand until November. And I don't know about you, but I pulled my hand away quite a while ago. And she's trying to hold on to your hand. You'll see. Come November, you'll see. Do you know the type of coalition that could be organized right now to get behind one of the people that are outside the duopoly? Do you understand what could happen? What could really come from this? You know, you're telling people to be uncommitted, but you're not sending them nowhere. Huh? You're telling people to be uncommitted, but then you're not sending them nowhere. Where do you want them to go? What do you want them to do? It's a mess. It's a mess. Well, we got to think about this, people. We are going to be uncommitted for you if you don't. And go where? And do what? You won't even, will she mention it? Will Rashida Tlaib even mention Jill Stein or Cornel West's name? I don't see her sending them to any other type of a movement that is going to help her people and fight for her people. So pull your hand away and tell Rashida to stop holding on to your damn hand. That's what you do. We're going to go to some of the comments here in the chat. If you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. Thank you very much. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Can't fall for this, guys. Can't fall for it. Remember, focus on their actions. All right, let's go to some of the comments here. Thank you, Aspen Fallen. Taco, no. Thank you. Thank you, Humongous Shift. Thanks for bringing it, Sabs. Thank you so much. Be Easy, that dude said, yet she never talks about Black issues. The only time I remember was defunding the police. And then she, like I said, as time went by, she moved away from that. Marvin, Sabby, what's the demographic of Detroit, Black, Hispanic, Arab, etc.? Eric, could you look that up if you have time? Could you search the demographic? Last time I checked, I thought Detroit was like 80% Black. I could be, that was a couple years ago though. But Eric, if you have time, if you can look that up in the back. Thank you, Old Crow. That is what turned me off of Nina Turner. You can't sit here and talk about all of the atrocities occurring and then tell me to vote Democrat. They are loyal to the party, not the people. Exactly. Old Crow gets it. Thank you, Troy. Action, as Kamala Harris would say, stand up here and give fancy speeches. Ew, did I just quote Kamala Harris? Yes, you did. Thank you, Sparky. Make Israel Syria again. In those Ottoman Empire days, Levant Jews got along fine with their neighbors, whether Christian, Muslim, or otherwise. Thank you for that. The Oracle says, and Kirsten Sinema had far less of a principled basis to leave the Democratic Party, to my thinking. Yeah, that's right. Kirsten just did it for herself. Like, she was just like, yeah, I want to do some more. Thank you, Cool Blue. Rashida's Michigan district is the strongest level of Democrat. I think you mean blue, so Democrat. Saul Good. Dems are counting on all Gazans being dead by election day and saying sorry, but do you want Trump? And you know what, Saul? I was going to bring that up when we get to a later story, but that's exactly what I think as well. I think that's the game plan that they're trying to work with. Thank you, Eric. Eric says, okay, Detroit is 77.8% Black. Okay, thank you, ES. Record-breaking temperatures, the U.S. military. Planet's Earth greatest enemy with Abby Martin. She needs to leave the Dems. Actions speak louder. 100. Thank you, Sparky. Great work, Sabby. Love you. Thank you very much. Love you too. And thank you for this. DC is Tel Aviv West. Thank you. Thank you. Exactly. Let's get the comment there from Rockfin. All right. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Voted for Pelosi as speaker without a demand to force the vote for Medicare for all and refused to join us on the Medicare for all marches. Voted for PAYGO. Did she vote against Capitol Police funding? Was she a co-sponsor of ending Tulsi's Presidential Wars Act? Did she vote against the CARES Act, the largest upward transfer of wealth in history? No call out of Pelosi for not allowing amendments to counter the GOP Senate bill. Interesting, and thank you for this. Did she not vote against Zelensky's Nazi Azov battalion Ukrainian military funding? Exactly, guys. Didn't fight to provide checks for back rent to catch up and money for future rent when she knew rent moratorium was ending. Voted to force railroad workers back to work, forcing the contract to vote. Oh, actually, wait a minute. On the railroad worker strike, she didn't vote in favor of that. She was the only one, just FYI, Roger, Rashida Tlaib was the only one that did not vote against the workers for the railroad strike. She was that only squad member that did that. And thank you for this. Even though Flint is not in her district, what is this thing about her trying to flatter Black people, saying most beautiful Black city, but what has she done for Black Detroiters? I see Rome out there helping them, but not her. Didn't have any empathy for the issues we got behind her on when it came to that office, but only feels the empathy when it affects her. Representative democracy is a failed experiment. Thank you so much for all of that, Roger. Thank you. Hey. All right, let's move on to craziness that happened over the weekend. Something wild and crazy happened at the Libertarian convention over the weekend. Not something I usually pay attention to. This year was a little bit different, though, because for whatever reason, the Libertarian Party invited Donald Trump to speak. And I don't think it really went the way that Trump thought it was going to go. They also, of course, invited RFK Jr. Now, obviously, you know, RFK Jr. was seeking the nomination of the Libertarian Party. We'll get to that in just a second. But Trump showed up there and Trump was booed. I don't know what he was expecting. Let's get into it.
Thank you. And if you vote for me on day one, I will commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht to a sentence of time served.
Well, that was one thing that a lot of libertarians at the convention apparently did like, the statement that he made there about Ross Ulbricht. Apparently, if I remember correctly, Ross, I think he ran like this black web site or something like that. So they were really excited to hear about that. You can see the signs there that say Free Ross.
He's already served 11 years. We're going to get him home. We're going to get him home. That is why I'm committing to you tonight that I will put a libertarian in my cabinet and also libertarians in senior posts. Combined with us in a partnership, we're asking that of the libertarians. We must work together. Combine with us. You have to combine with us. We cannot give crooked Joe Biden 4 more years. We cannot give crooked Joe Biden 4 more years.
Thanks for watching.
So that's where the boos came in there towards the end when he was asking the Libertarian Party to combine with his campaign. Now, obviously, that kind of defeats the purpose of a third party. Like if the Libertarians wanted to do that, they would have probably done that a long time ago. This isn't the first time that Donald Trump is running for office. So they did not seem to like that too well. So it's really interesting that Donald Trump shows up to the Libertarian Convention and basically tells them, you need to come join my campaign so we can really, you know, defeat Joe Biden so he cannot become reelected. It's really bizarre. And like, they're a third party. They do not want to be a part of the Republican Party. So why would you even come there and do that? And then they booed. And what you didn't see here, another piece that was mentioned as well, was that I guess after the booing, he made a joke towards them saying, you'll continue just to get 3%. He did like a little dig towards the Libertarian Party. Like, well, you either combine with me if you're serious and you want some type of traction, or you'll just continue to get like your 3%. So it was really interesting. I don't know what he was expecting to come from this, but obviously, you know, it seemed like there were some supporters there that actually would consider some type of collaboration with Donald Trump, but then there were other supporters where they're like, no, we don't feel this is cool. They really, it seems like the Libertarian Party, ever since RFK Jr. said he was interested in seeking some type of nomination with them, it seems like the Libertarian Party is now split, whereas some of the party members do want RFK Jr. to run with them, and some of the party members do not, because they feel as though RFK Jr. doesn't represent a lot of the libertarian values. And it's not just about the war piece, right? It's not just because of the statements that he said, like give Israel everything that they need, et cetera. In reference to Israel and Gaza and how he unequivocally supports Israel. It's not just that. It's also about some of the policies that he has towards gun rights. They're also not incredibly crazy about RFK Jr.'s passion for the environment either. So there's a number of things where people just feel like, nah, bro, like you're not rocking with us. Now, that being said, what was also interesting, Dave Smith, who is probably one of the most popular members of the Libertarian Party, he was on Breaking Points. I believe this was earlier this morning. And he talked about why Trump was booed. And of course, what did Donald Trump expect to happen at a third party convention when you tell them to basically join along and coalesce with you and be a part of the duopoly? Listen to this.
Well, I mean, you know, the Libertarian Party it's a third party, and I don't know as much about, say, like the Green Party, but I'd imagine it's a similar type of dynamic where, I mean, these are people, they're a member of a third party in a country that is rigged for two parties. And the reason they're there is because they are so disgusted with the establishment of both political parties. And so to have an actual president who's got a 4-year track record and many things that us libertarians are very unhappy about, this was just destined to go this way. I'm not sure if he knew what he was walking into. I think you know, he might have been like, oh, libertarians are kind of like Republicans, and maybe they'll like some things about me. And but you know, Bobby Kennedy and Vivek Ramaswamy both spoke the previous day, and they drew some boos, but they also got some cheers. But Donald Trump before he said a word, the place had it with him.
So that part was kind of funny that he said that. Actually, you guys, if you follow Pasta on Twitter, co-host of Convo Couch, but Pasta also has another channel called Pasta to Go. He was at the Libertarian Convention. So if you follow him on Twitter, he covered a lot of this. I know I saw an interview that he had with Thomas Massey, which is Thomas Massey. He's another little, we ain't gonna get into all that. But follow Pasta and you'll see more information about this. Vivek Ramaswamy was there. It's, you know, some people are saying, they're like, why are Republicans trying to bleed into the Libertarian Party, which is a third party? Like, they're a third party for a reason, right? So some people saw that and they said, why is Vivek there? Why is Trump there? And I wonder if Trump was invited because, remember, RFK Jr. said he did want to debate Donald Trump. Remember that? And Trump accepted that. From last I remember, he accepted it. Joe Biden obviously was not there, but I think he may have been invited as well. I don't know. But yeah, mixed results.
What do you think was his goal in going? And do you think he accomplished whatever that goal was? By the way, I've never loved libertarians more than this moment. And you're right with the Green Party comparison, because if Joe Biden went and spoke at a Green Party convention, I don't think it would go very well at this point.
Well, it's also like I think people don't understand, and it's the reason why I used the Green Party comparison, because I think that there might be some people who have the perception that say, like, well, the Green Party are a click left of the Democrats, or, you know, the differences are that, you know, whatever, like the Democrats wanted Obamacare, but they want, you know, nationalized health care. But that's not really the dynamic, or that is, but there's much more than that. The people in the Green Party look at Barack Obama as a war criminal who should be put in prison. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just, oh, I'm a click to the left of you or something like that. And that's the same dynamic with libertarians. We look at Donald Trump as the guy who for 4 straight years backed the Saudis in their genocidal war against the people in Yemen. It's not like, oh, I wish he had lowered taxes a bit more than he did. There's much more fundamental issues.
And I will also add too, because I've heard people make these same type of statements that Dave Smith is saying. It's also true too that when you invite those types of politicians into the third party space, it's not as though they are going to move to your position. You're going to have to move to their position, which is exactly what Donald Trump wanted them to do. He said, join me. It's not like he's saying, I'll join you. He said, join me, right? Same thing for the Green Party, as Dave was saying. You know, if a Democrat were to come to the Green Party, like if Joe Biden were to come to a Green Party invitation or whatever, it's not like Joe Biden would move to the left and go along with the Green Party's policies. If anything, Joe Biden would be there to try to recruit them to go along with him. So we always have to remember who's in power and who has the upper hand when we talk about building some type of coalitions.
And, you know, to your question, I think you guys have covered it on your show quite a bit. I think they're really concerned about Bobby Kennedy, and they realize that the margins might be much thinner than they think. And the Libertarians are a party who have gotten millions of votes for the last two cycles. I don't think they're going to this cycle, but they have in the last two cycles. And I guess they made the calculation that was worth making an attempt to get those votes.
I think it was.
Yeah, so that was interesting there. And then I mentioned, I know someone said this in the comment as well, they did invite Joe Biden. So it's really interesting. I will say, you know, the Libertarian Party has made a lot of news this year, particularly when it comes to RFK Jr. Now, this actually happened at the event, the convention here as well, where they were announcing or extending nominations to different candidates. And this is the piece here where the Libertarian Party chair is actually asking, do we agree to extend a nomination to RFK Jr.? Now, I just want to say something really quick here because things did get confusing the other day. This video was going around on Twitter, and I think a lot of people saw that and they assumed that RFK Jr. was the nominee. So just to clear things up, they were extending a nomination to RFK Jr., but RFK Jr. was not the nominee for the Libertarian Party. So they were not saying, RFK Jr., you are the nominee for the party. They were just extending him a nomination, just like they have with other candidates as well in the past. But listen to this here.
And he is a member of the Libertarian Party.
He is, Madam Chair, as the Credentials Committee Chair, I can confirm that he is a basic sustaining member.
He is a basic sustaining member. And it's my understanding that he did turn in nomination papers that had the required amount of signatures on them. Does he accept the nomination?
We have confirmation that he does.
Do you want me to call him and ask him if he accepts the nomination?
Yes.
Can we please move on to others while this is going on? This is a wait.
You can call me.
So do you see what's happening? So this happened on the spot. So she's calling RFK Jr. to ask him if he is willing to accept the nomination. And that's what I'm saying. I think some people saw this video and they said, oh my God, RFK Jr. just accepted the nomination. He's the nominee for the Libertarian Party. And that was not the case. So he was not the nominee for the Libertarian Party. But this video went viral, and as well as his acceptance also goes viral. And I think it really had people in a tizzy over the weekend. And people were like, what the hell is going on? But we'll get to who the actual nominee or for the Libertarian Party is. And it's not who you think it is.
Madam Chair, I'm going to do it myself right now if you want.
Madam Chair, Mike 2. Point of order, Madam.
Well, let's get there first and see if he picks up. Ringing. Good morning. I'm at the podium, and I need to ask you if you accept your nomination. I'm not on the microphone, but I'm at the podium.
Anybody in the California?
Can the chair pass the gavel and we can move on to other nominations while this call is happening?
Yes.
So this was another thing too that some people did say. They were just like, why are we giving all this preference and consideration towards RFK Jr. and there are other potential candidates that people are interested in as well, right? So there did seem to be some type of favoritism towards RFK Jr.
Actually, you're expecting the line. With all due respect, it's my turn. I asked her. So I was just going to tell her that she didn't. We just get in the phone right now. Yeah. She's on the phone with me.
He's going to get back to us.
Madam Chair,
Madam Chair,
Mike 2.
Yeah, so that happened there. And then well, he did actually get back to them. So he was obviously not at the event, but he did send a video response. So check this out.
I'm sending in this video from California this morning to let you know that I accept this unexpected honor. I've always admired the Libertarian Party. I have a deep alignment with the core values, the antipathy toward war, the commitment to end our addiction to forever wars, and the love of personal freedoms and liberties, the understanding that the only way that we are going to fulfill the destinies that God created us to fulfill is by exercising freedom of choice, and that the
Let me pause for just a second, okay? Because one of the things about this video, he said that he always, I guess, had like deep respect or admired the Libertarian Party. But if that's the case, why were you running as a Democrat? Why didn't you run through the Libertarian Party like right off the jump? Like, why were you, you know what I mean? And then left the Democratic Party, decided to run as an independent, and then was like, okay, I want to seek the nomination of the Libertarian Party. Like, if the only reason you're wanting to do that is so that you can get ballot access on all 50 states, which the Libertarian Party has, right? Then that's not cool because you're taking advantage of the party. And that was the impression I got from the start when RFK said he was interested in doing that he was taking advantage of the Libertarian Party. Like, do you agree with the principles? Yes or no? And there's a number of principles where he does not align with the Libertarian Party.
Choice, and that the United States Constitution is the global template for outlining those freedoms, and that those freedoms are sacrosanct. The Constitution was written for hard times, and that there are no exceptions. I'm going to protect these rights. I'm going to protect your rights. I'm going to protect the United States Constitution. And I'm going to end the foreign wars. And I'm very, very grateful to the Libertarian Party for this great honor. And I look forward to an alliance across the country, a fusion alliance of all of these independent parties who are now challenging the Republican, Democrat, corrupt duopoly.
Okay, so that was RFK Jr. accepting the nomination from the Libertarian Party. Now, again, as I said, some people saw that and they said, oh my God, he's the official nominee for the Libertarian Party. This isn't fair, yada, yada. But he was not the actual nominee of the Libertarian Party. So even though those videos went viral and caused quite a stir amongst a lot of people, he was not the nominee. The nominee for the Libertarian Party after they voted was Chase Oliver. Now, Chase Oliver ran for Senate in Georgia. I think you guys remember we covered this before. He ran for Senate in Georgia as a Libertarian candidate. He actually did receive a lot of votes for a third party candidate, but obviously, you know, did not win in that race. But this is someone who is a part of the Libertarian Party. Now, some people are pushing back and they're like, why did they choose this guy? You know, I'm not 100% sure. Maybe I'll try to interview. We'll see if we can bring Larry back on the show, Larry Sharp, and other libertarians back on the show to ask them why they went with that decision. There are some people that are not too happy about that. And some people are saying, why didn't they go with someone with a more popular name like RFK Jr.? Because that would obviously, they have a better chance of actually getting higher than the 3% if they went with RFK Jr. But that's not what the people wanted. That's not how they voted, right? Again and again, RFK Jr.'s policy with Israel, like his opinion on Israel, and give them everything that they want, and with these wars and stuff, that does not align with the Libertarian Party. But Chase Oliver, so who is he?
Well, the Libertarian Party is putting political activist Chase Oliver on the ticket for November after they rejected Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and President Trump. The former president was booed on stage at the party's convention on Saturday before mocking its electoral record. Well, the Libertarian Party chair ruling Mr. Trump couldn't be nominated because he never submitted the proper paperwork. Well, the former president's appearance coming a day before independent candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was unexpectedly nominated after his campaign said he wouldn't be running as a Libertarian.
So I wouldn't say he was unexpectedly nominated. He had talked about this in multiple interviews that he was interested in actually seeking the nomination of the Libertarian Party. So I don't think this was unexpected at all.
FK was eliminated in the first round of voting. Well, News Nation's Tom.
Okay, so he was eliminated in the first round. And I want to show you something else about Chase Oliver. Part of the reason why some people have pause against Chase is they are actually saying, oh, it's this political activist guy that they chose to run, which he is an activist. We talked about him before during that third party debate, which, by the way, RFK Jr. rejected to attend. See, a lot of people remember things. When there was the third party debate, Jill Stein, Claudia De La Cruz, Chase Oliver, Lars Mapstead, Jasmine Sullivan, they were all present to debate. Everybody was invited. Dr. Cornel West did not attend, and RFK Jr. did not attend. Chase was there. So people remember these things, you know? So when RFK Jr.'s team feels like these things are not important for him to actually participate in, people remember these things when you're trying to seek out their nomination from their party. Here is a clip here of Chase Oliver actually speaking about the police. He was one of the activists that was a part of the Black Lives Matter movement. Listen to this.
So I'm here to talk about not just the injustice that Cop City brings, but what militarization of police brings to us. I was in the streets in summer of 2020 when we were peacefully protesting the murder of George Floyd, the murder of Breonna Taylor and others. And it was the Atlanta police who decided to bring the tanks rolling down the street and who decided to call in the National Guard. It was y'all who corralled us. It was y'all who were pepper spraying and tear gassing us. It was the police who were pulling people out of their cars and arresting them for no reason other than the fact they were lost on the night of the protest. And so what does the police get in reward for that? $67 million of taxpayer money to fund your facility? That's ridiculous. I don't think it's right to be giving you $1 until you restore trust with the people. And the way you do that is pretty simple. You do that by by ending qualified immunity for the Atlanta City Police so that we can get our day in court when we're done wrong. You do that by requiring your officers to hold liability insurance. So when they do wrong, it doesn't come out of the taxpayer's pocket from other services. It comes out of the pockets of the police officers who have to pay for those insurance policies. If you want to hold police accountable, there's a lot of ways to do it. But clear-cutting forests so that you can build this facility is a spit in the face of the people who have been out here speaking against it for months and months on end. Take a poll, read the room, listen to the people, and you will see that they don't want this.
Okay, so one thing I will say about Chase Oliver, he is good on policing. When it comes to the police, he has been really good on that issue, and he's part of the activism. He has spoken out against Cop City, but not just speaking out against these things, he actually is an activist. So he has been a part of some of those protests where the police have responded violently to peaceful protesters. And that's another thing I was going to add about the Libertarian Party. When it comes to policing, they have very different views about policing than the Republican Party. So that's another thing why it was weird to me that Trump would say, you need to come and coalesce with me. Because again, they don't share the same views about policing that the Republican Party does or the Democratic Party does, to be honest with you. So Chase Oliver is the official Libertarian Party candidate for president for 2024. Should be interesting, folks. It is going to be an interesting year. Let's get into some of the comments here. It really sucks though, because if you were an RFK Jr. supporter, if he would have gotten that nomination, then he would have been an even bigger threat to Biden and Trump, because he would have been on the ballot in like all 50 states. And I think that's what RFK Jr. is probably counting on, but it did not go that way. So that is that. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Newsom / Kushner 24. Interesting. I wouldn't vote for either one of those. Thank you, Michael. Why is Brandon going to address the nation after the orange man's verdict? Seems like a setup. Yeah. We don't know why Joe Biden does what he does these days. Humongous Shift says Ron Paul is now a Republican. Retro Gramer, Libertarian nominee is Chase Oliver. He was at that third party debate a few months ago. Yeah. And who knows? Like, maybe if RFK had shown up and participated, maybe there would have been more votes that went his way, but he was eliminated in the first round. Thank you, Roger. Larry was there. Have him on for insight and for his perspective. Yes, I'll reach out to Larry, hear what he has to say about all this. JLJ, I'll give Trump credit for having the courage to show up. He did show up. I usually say Trump knows how to read a room, but I feel like this time around he didn't read that room properly. Not that room. Thank you, Sparky. It's good for the crowd and non-establishment interviewers to push back against Trump on specific issues. He'll then consider those issues. He won't hear about them from the neocons who surround him. True, but I would say that Trump is just going to say what you want to hear anyway. Golden Monarch says, if so, why Sabby? What does RFK Jr. offer to these libertarians? Zionist Bitcoin? Lack of reparations? I think it's just name recognition. It's a way to get the party out there, to make the party more well-known, having someone with that name recognition. I think that's a big part of it. And that can also help build up the party, Thank you, Sparky. Trump is only as good as the last person he spoke with. That's why the neocons surround him like a cocoon. And thank you, New York Varsity. I love two things in life, my weapons and my gay people. Pro free speech, stop the genocide, no mandates, good candidate in a fractured party. Ooh, that was another thing too with Trump, the mandates, right? Like, so some libertarians aren't feeling him too well because of that as well. So can't forget about the pandemic. Some people are not cool with that. All right, guys, go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And it's time for 2 quick announcements, and then we will carry on with our other stories. If you are free on June 8th, check this out. There will be another protest outside of the White House. This is hosted by Answer Coalition. On June 8th, we'll come together and surround the White House. Wearing red, we'll show the world that we are the red line. We demand an immediate ceasefire, an end to the siege on Gaza, the freedom of all Palestinian prisoners, and an end to the occupation of Palestine. So it says here, Biden, we are your red line. Stop the genocide. Surround the White House. So that is June 8th at 12 p.m. Eastern time. So if you are free that day, definitely check that out. Answer Coalition is really based in reference to these rallies. Like, they are really good at bringing people together from all different states across the country. I'll have to check for this particular event, but for other events in the past, they also offer buses that come to different cities. So you can actually reserve a seat on the bus if you don't have transportation to get there. And they have the buses line up and people get on the bus, they head to DC, and the buses bring you back. So not everybody can do that, right? Again, that is June 8th, 12 p.m. Eastern. Okay. Cool. Wanted to make sure I shouted that out. And one more announcement. Don't miss this Thursday. I'm announcing this tonight because I'm not live on Wednesdays, obviously. So Thursday, Garland Nixon is going to be on the JB and Sabby show on Revolutionary Blackout Network. So again, Sabby Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. Don't miss that, you guys. Yeah, thank you, Rachel. That's a nice flyer. Yeah, so Erin, our graphic designer at RBN, she created this. Yeah, she's really good with this. She's really good with the colors, right? So Garland Nixon will be there Thursday. That's 5 p.m. Eastern time on Revolutionary Blackout Network. That's for me and JB's show. And he is going to be discussing this coalition, so to speak, with Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin. The hug heard around the world and this idea of a multipolar world. So don't miss that. Again, that is 5 p.m. Eastern on Thursday at Revolutionary Blackout Network. And then we can go on to the next one. Yeah. Cool. Let's go to these comments here and then we'll get to the Rafah massacre. Thank you so much for the super chat, Sparky. Kidding about Newsom / Kushner 2024. Okay, that's good. Thank you, Nexus Games. Trump didn't issue the mandates. He left it up to the states. It was Biden who started the mandate. Yeah, but some people still have issue that he even did that he left it up to the states. Some people still take issue with that because then basically it was all about like what your governor decided to do. So I do know a number of people that are not happy with that. Right? But thank you so much for that. Okay, let's get to the next story. So over the weekend, yes, it was Memorial Weekend, but as you've seen before in the past, there have been a number of attacks in Rafah that have happened while there was either a holiday weekend or some other type of event, whether it's the Oscars, etc. Israel has decided to attack Palestinian civilians while the rest of us are pretty much preoccupied with other things like the Super Bowl. So over the weekend, this was no different, where the IDF actually attacked a refugee camp in Rafah. This was supposed to be a safe zone for the Palestinian people. So a number of people have been killed. There were people that were actually set on fire because apparently one of those strikes hit, if I remember correctly, hit a tank and that set things on fire as well. More children have been killed in Rafah. And I want to get started with this story, this clip here from Case Study QB. So Case Study is back from vacation. Let's get into this.
This morning, Israel is facing international condemnation for a deadly airstrike near a tent camp for displaced Palestinians in Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calls it a, quote, tragic incident and says there will be an investigation. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez has more from Israel.
This morning, new fallout after that deadly Israeli strike in Rafah over the weekend. An Israeli official tells NBC News it appears that an IDF bomb ignited a gas tank at the tent camp, sending flames ripping through the site as displaced families slept in shelters made of wood and plastic.
Yeah, so it was a gas tank.
At least 45 people were killed, according to the emergency services in Hamas-run Gaza. Many of them women and children. Hundreds more wounded. These three brothers lost their only sister. They say she was 7 months pregnant. The IDF said the strike killed 2 senior Hamas commanders.
And I just want to pause there at that part there. The IDF is saying that this strike killed 2 senior Hamas commanders. First of all, do we have any proof of that? Do we know that that's true? That's just the IDF's word, and they've been known to lie over and over again. So we don't have any proof that that actually happened. And 2, even if it did kill 2 senior Hamas commanders, that still doesn't excuse what happened to the civilians. And that is what the IDF is trying to do. In Israel, they're making these apologies saying it was an accident. It was a oopsie. We've heard them say this before, that it was an accident. It was a mistake. We're actually going to investigate it. Right. And we trust Israel to lead their own investigations. Would you trust a police department to lead an internal police investigation against police brutality? No, you wouldn't. We cannot believe these lies that this is another accident. They know exactly what they're doing. So the question now becomes, how much longer is the US government going to tolerate this? Because other countries are already starting to not just push back, but to separate themselves from the United States. Other countries in the West are separating themselves from the United States when it comes to Israel now. So last time when I told you the world has turned against Israel, believe me, more and more countries are speaking out.
Amid international criticism, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling it a tragic incident and promising an investigation. Though giving no sign he'll halt the military.
Let me pull that out for just a second. Okay, yeah. I just wanted to pull that for just a second because I wanted to make sure. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. We'll bring back in this part right about here.
The White House says the images are heartbreaking, adding Israel must take every precaution possible to protect civilians.
The White House is saying the images are heartbreaking, but the White House is supplying the weapons. None of this is possible. None of this is possible without the weapons from the United States. And another thing I want to add as well, when John Kirby says, unless we see a full-scale ground invasion of Rafah, that is not a red line, unless we see that. Well, let me tell you what the IDF can do instead. They can, instead of having that full-scale ground invasion that John Kirby is referring to, they can just take out different camps here and there until eventually all the people are gone. And the US government would do absolutely nothing because they don't consider this to be a full-scale invasion.
The death toll in Rafah bringing protesters onto the streets.
Yeah, so there were a number of protests. You're going to see more on June 8th. I just want to speed past this part here. There we go.
Families at the Rafah camp had been displaced several times already by the fighting, but were still unable to outrun the war. Why did those innocent people die? What was their guilt, this woman asks. Now they're packing up their tents once again and preparing to move on.
Could you imagine living this way? Every day, you don't know if, you're going to be hit every day. And just living this way where you just constantly have to pack up your stuff and move somewhere else to another so-called safe area that Israel just continues to ignore anyway. This is no accident. You cannot believe these statements from the IDF. These have been targeted attacks. Now, I want to play this clip here where Claire McCaskill actually steps in because, yes, believe it or not, she's back in the limelight of things. And I want you to pay attention to the way that Claire McCaskill frames this, because it's almost like she's trying to condemn the ICC or blame this on the ICC for the reason as why this happened. Pay close attention to her words.
It might be time for us to back up and look at this from the very beginning and realize what Hamas has accomplished here. A horrible terrorist organization that wants nothing more than to wipe Israel off the face of the planet.
So again, repeating AIPAC talking points. Remember, Claire McCaskill used to be a senator, so I'm pretty sure she was probably in bed with the Israeli lobby as well during her political career. Notice how she puts the blame back on Hamas instead of the blame on Israel, where they are the ones that are committing these war crimes, right? Sounds like a trained senator, doesn't it?
Went into Israel and committed atrocities, knowing what Netanyahu's reaction would be, knowing that this would stop the progress of normalizing relationships between Israel and other Arab nations in the Middle East, knowing that there would be a disproportionate response. And when I say disproportionate, I mean numbers of civilians killed. I'm not saying that there's anything that Israel has done that comes close to the horrible atrocities that were purposely committed by Hamas.
Pause. So do you see what she's doing? This is on MSNBC. So although more Palestinians have been killed by the IDF, Claire McCaskill is framing this in such a way to make it sound like more Israelis have been killed. And we all know that is not true. So the death of Israelis, according to Claire McCaskill, is more important and more severe than the death of the Palestinian people. When you have over almost 40,000 Palestinian people that have been killed, that is nothing, according to Claire McCaskill, compared to the 1,200 Israelis that died on October 7th. Piers Morgan has been repeating this talking point. Morning Joe has been repeating this talking point. Alan Dershowitz has been competing. What they are trying to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, is that they consider Israeli life to be more valuable and more important. And the way that they frame this to try to get through to people is by saying that this is all Hamas's fault. Was it Hamas's fault when Israel removes Palestinians from their homes in the West Bank? Is that Hamas's fault too? Was it Hamas's fault when Israel arrests young children and beats young children and abuses young children? Was it Hamas's fault when Palestinian people were protesting peacefully and the IDF shot at their feet? Was it Hamas's fault when the state of Israel sterilized Ethiopian women against their will? You see, that's the atrocity that a lot of people don't like to talk about. You don't see Claire McCaskill mentioning that. They don't want to talk about what happened to the Ethiopian Jewish women. Was that Hamas's fault?
Back on October 7th. So Hamas has gotten what they wanted more than anything was to isolate Israel. And frankly, you know what else they wanted? They wanted to recruit more extreme terrorists to their cause. And when you have something happen, like happened over the weekend with these women and children being burned to death in a camp, innocents, that creates more radical terrorists for the Hamas cause.
Who burned the women and the children in the camps? That was the IDF. That was Israel. And if you want to talk about people being recruited for what Hamas's cause, I would say look no further than what's happening to Palestinian people in the West Bank. Where do people think Hamas came from? They didn't just wake up one day and said, hey, we just want to be radical and we're just going to do whatever we want to do for no reason. Where do you think it came from? Those are the people that grew up inside occupied Gaza. Those are the people that were not allowed freedom to move. Those are the people that were stripped of whatever sort of rights they had before they were occupied. Those are the people where a lot of them were refugees. So we can continue this. We can go all the way back to the Nakba. You have no one to blame but Israel itself. You cannot sit up here and kick people out and abuse people and occupy people and oppress people and expect them never to try to rise up against you. You cannot do this. So Hamas has not isolated Israel, Claire. Israel isolated itself from the rest of the world when it decided to go against the statement from the ICJ. Twice. Israel isolated itself from the rest of the world when you had IDF soldiers posting videos of themselves, calling Palestinian people animals, talking about how they are the chosen people, not the Palestinian people, so the Palestinian people shouldn't be there. Israel isolated itself when Netanyahu makes a speech and he tells people in that conference that they want to expand Israel into parts of Syria, into parts of Lebanon, and his idea of the greater Israel. Israel abandoned itself when they sat up here and they started these organizations like AIPAC that have controlled our politicians and basically damn and shame anyone that does not put Israel first. Why living in America, damn it? And I don't know about you guys, but I live in America. And I live in a country where the politicians don't want to put the American people first. I live in a country where people in Flint, Michigan can't even get clean water. but we can give $3.8 billion a year to Israel every year, where they can have free health care and they can have free college education for people in Israel. I don't live in Israel. I live in America. And I've watched our government sit up here and abandon our people, where you can't go past a freaking subway station without seeing homeless veterans on the street. The same ones that they said, respect the troops that went and fought for your country and you turned your back on them. That's the country I live in. I live in America, where everybody don't have health care in this country. Your country is set. We are not.
So what I would ask Benjamin Netanyahu at this point is what is the goal here? How do you think you're ever going to get ahead of this if by your actions, even if it is a tragic mistake, you're creating more of the very people you're trying to eliminate? It is really, I think it will go down as one of the, I don't know how even in the beginning he thought they could eliminate every single Hamas extreme terrorist in Gaza. So it is what it is now, and I worry for Israel because of how they've been isolated on the world stage as a result of the just sheer volume of innocent citizens that have been killed.
You worry for Israel because when you were a senator, you were in bed with the Israeli lobby yourself. It all goes back to the money, folks. All goes back to the money. But speaking of isolation, something else happened this weekend with Israel. Now, I want to know how they explain this one. It appears that an Egyptian soldier was killed in a cross-border fire near Rafah. Egyptian soldier. Now, Egypt is mad at Israel. Was this an accident as well? Let's get into this clip here from One.
An Egyptian soldier has been killed in a shooting incident near the Rafah border crossing between Egypt and the Gaza Strip. And this border crossing, remember, is controlled by the Israelis now. Both the Egyptian and the Israeli authorities have launched a probe into this incident. The Israeli military reported the incident on the Egyptian border and said that it is in discussions with Egypt. The Egyptian military has issued a statement. It has said that a probe into the death of the Egyptian soldier in the shootout is currently on. The soldier was on protection duty, and according to the Egyptians, the probe is being conducted by the competent authorities. According to the news agency AFP, the Al Qahira news, which has links to the Egyptian intelligence, has quoted a defense official as saying that an initial probe of the shooting incident indicated that Israeli troops and Palestinian militants had exchanged fire, which led to shooting in several directions.
So the Egyptian soldier was shot. This was not an airstrike. He was shot. And you have to remember, Egypt is aligned with the United States. Egypt has been exchanging some words as of late since this happened. Egypt is not feeling this at all and does not feel that this is a mistake. So now you have Egypt is mad at Israel.
He further added that the Egyptian security personnel were taking protective measures and dealing with the source of the fire. The shooting incident occurred amidst tensions between Egypt and Israel, or the Israeli forces taking control of the Rafah border crossing 3 weeks ago as part of their offensive on the Gaza Strip. The move has blocked the passage of humanitarian aid into Gaza via Egypt. Earlier, Egypt had also warned the state of Israel against its military operations in the southern Gaza city of Rafah.
So this is another thing. Egypt was against this. Egypt warned Israel against military operation in Rafah. So they were very firm about this, very strong about this.
Though fatal security incidents between the two nations have been pretty rare, a day after the Israeli-Hamas war began in October, a policeman in Egypt's Alexandria had opened fire on an Israeli tour group, killing 2 Israelis and their Egyptian guide. In a previous shooting incident in June 2023, Israel said that an Egyptian policeman had crossed the border and had killed 3 Israeli soldiers before being shot. However, the Egyptian army has said that the Egyptian policeman had crossed the border in pursuit of drug traffickers.
Yeah, it's wild and crazy, you guys. Like we're going to fast forward. I want to fast forward a little bit here because he speaks kind of slow, but I do like one for some of these things. Oh no, he's speaking too slow for me. We'll go to the next one. But Egypt is another one that we need to be concerned about and we need to focus on, because Egypt, again, they're one of the other countries that did speak out against what is happening in Rafah. Again, that is another country that's aligned with the United States. So, I mean, you have, whether it's Norway, Spain has spoken out, Germany speaks out, France speaking out, Egypt's like, what the hell are you doing? Now you're shooting one of our soldiers. What is going on? What is going on, right? I told you that Israel was dangerous and they needed to be stopped. So Israel has isolated itself. Now, of course, Netanyahu is calling this a mishap. All of this is just one big mishap, according to Netanyahu.
Israel is facing backlash for a deadly airstrike killing dozens of Palestinians at a camp in Rafah. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling it a tragic mishap, saying they were targeting 2 Hamas leaders. It comes just days after the UN's top court ordered Israel to immediately halt its military operation in Rafah. Here's ABC's Britt Clennon.
Tonight, screams of horror amid a burning inferno. The frightful, frantic moments after Israeli strikes engulfed a refugee camp in western Rafah on Sunday night. Desperate attempts to put out the flames, people scrambling to rescue anyone they can. At least 50 killed and 249 injured in the overnight attack, according to the Hamas-run Gaza Health Ministry. Many people treated with severe burns and shrapnel injuries.
One thing I want to add to, they keep saying that the Palestinian Authority and the health ministry is the one that are talking about these attacks. But I also want to let you know, Egypt has also confirmed some of this as well. It's not just, in fact, I'll pull up my Twitter account to show you that in just a second, where I retweeted about that. It's not just the Palestinian Authority.
Tonight, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu calling the strikes a tragic mishap, saying there was a technical failure and that the incident will be investigated. The strikes hitting the Tal al-Sultan area. Manal Salman saying, "We were in the tents and suddenly we found rockets falling on us in the same place. There is nowhere safe for us to go." Her family now forced to move for the 8th time.
Could you imagine living in this? Like, look at this. Look at having to live in this. And then not only the fact that they're blocking food from getting in. This is absolutely ridiculous.
To move for the 8th time. The IDF claiming they were conducting an intelligence-based strike, which killed 2 senior Hamas officials, stating they regret any harm to uninvolved civilians during combat.
No, they don't. We've seen the videos of them calling Palestinian people animals. They don't regret any harm that has been done towards civilians when they have said that we need to get rid of all of them. You have a sitting Congress member in Congress, Brian Mast, who even said even the babies were Hamas. Former IDF soldier, by the way. Why the hell is he in Congress? If you served in another country's military, why are you in Congress in the United States? Sounds like to me you might have a conflict of interest, don't you think? Don't think that should be allowed at all.
The White House speaking out, a National Security Council spokesperson calling the images out of Rafah devastating and heartbreaking, adding that Israel must protect civilians, though maintaining the White House position that Israel has a right to go after Hamas.
Lindsay, a U.S. official telling ABC News they received information from the Israelis that material from the strike may have ignited a fuel tank, creating that massive fire. And 2 IDF officials telling me that details are still unclear. And Lindsay, authorities are also investigating what happened after an Egyptian soldier was killed in an exchange of fire involving Israeli troops at the Rafah crossing. Lindsay.
Britt, thank you.
See? So, I mean, it's, I don't know how else to say this, but two things, sometimes I say two things can be true at the same time. This is not one of those times. This is not one of those situations. Two things cannot be true at the same time with this particular event that happened over the weekend. Okay? Because you attacked the people in the camp, which was a safe zone. And at the same time, you shot an Egyptian soldier. Both of those things can't be mishaps. I don't believe either one of them are mishaps, but the IDF story does not match up. The IDF is shooting anything that walks, anything that moves. That is what's happening. And the world is letting it happen. The US government is letting it happen. Someone is going to have to take the upper hand, and that may mean they may have to put sanctions on the United States government. Because the US government is the one that is supplying the weapons. And hell, why not? We put sanctions on everybody else. That's why they don't want to listen to the statement from the ICJ. Because the US government knows that the ICJ can come after the US government next for being complicit. Even Elizabeth Warren and her flip-flopping ass. She put out a statement. The Israeli bombing of a refugee camp inside a designated safe zone is horrific. Israel has a duty to protect innocent civilians, and Palestinians seeking shelter in Rafah have nowhere safe to go. Netanyahu's assault of Rafah must stop. We need an immediate ceasefire. Elizabeth Warren, the snake, voted for this. You voted for it. Who voted to send the weapons to Israel? Elizabeth Warren. Even Community Notes is calling her out. This year, Senator Warren voted to supply Israel with $3.8 billion of weapons. Sorry, I had to cough. This year, Senator Warren voted to supply Israel with $3.8 billion of weapons and defund the UN's aid organization for Gaza. They even put the bill here so you can click on the bill to see who voted for it. Elizabeth Warren is full of it, as usual. But now there is new information in reference to Israel being isolated. Because you see, now Mexico has decided to step forward. That's right, our neighbor to the south. Mexico is invoking Article 63 of the ICJ statute, filed a declaration of intervention in the case concerning application of the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in the Gaza Strip. This is from Mexico. Our neighbor to the south. How embarrassed is the US government? Here's the document here. The ICJ, May 28th, 2024. There's the document there. And you can see the full text of it on the court's website. But yes, Mexico has filed. The world has turned on Israel. And the United States stands alone. We need more of that. Definitely need more of that. And I think I was going to show you guys this as well. One more thing I wanted to show you because I don't want to forget. Yeah, on my Twitter page. There was another thing that I saw that I wanted to show you. Elizabeth Warren is such a disaster, man. Such a freaking disaster. Okay, here we go. Pull this up. We got everybody pulling out the stops tonight. Pierce Morgan, I feel bad about the people, the women and the children, This right here. So remember that Gaza pier that was built for humanitarian aid? It's sinking into the ocean. So remember that?
האמריקאים פשוט התנתק,
Look.
וממש מוצף, עוד מעט המשאית נופלת למים, הכל פה הולך לטבוע. ככה זה שעוזרים לאויב.
Just like typical U.S. infrastructure. Fading away. And here is the part here about Egypt. So the IDF did respond. Last night, the IAF site carried out intelligence-based precise strike that targeted senior Hamas terrorists in Tal Sultan. Okay, so precise. So you see how they tell on themselves, precise strike, and yet Israel is saying it was an accident? Which was it, precise or an accident? And what about the Egyptian soldier? Precise or an accident? The Palestinian Authority, this is what I said, presidency and Egypt accused Israel of targeting the Center for Displaced People. So now the IDF is accusing Egypt of lying too. So it wasn't just the Palestinian Authority. It was also Egypt that accused Israel. What a mess. What a mess. All right, guys, if you haven't had a chance to do so, smash that like button. Thank you very much. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. And we are moving on over to the final story. This is pretty good. Glenn Greenwald and Alan Dershowitz. Let me go to some of the comments here first. Thank you for the super chat, Marcus. Trump also appointed John Bolton and said, I'll leave it up to the generals. Right. New York Varsity, real question. If the hostages are released, will the surge stop? We all know the answer to that question. No. I would argue some of the hostages may have already died, not because of anything that Hamas did to them, but because they may have been starved. Because Israel wasn't allowing humanitarian aid to get in. Thank you, baby Ethernet. Claire is a decaying husk of failed foreign policy. Thank you, New York Varsity. As a Gulf War vet, watching us give Israel U.S. veteran benefits makes my stomach turn. Yeah, like I said, like this is a mess. They're giving them anything and everything they want. Thank you, Stu. I believe Israel deliberately killed that soldier because they have deliberately done far worse to the U.S. Watch how Israel cucked the United States. Thank you for that, Stu. And thank you, John. I prefer Mexican beer to American beer. Oh, that is interesting. Interesting. I don't usually drink Dos Equis. What does that guy say? Wait a minute, John. You look like the Dos Equis guy a little bit. Oh, it's gone. I think, oh no, there you are. You kind of remind me of the Dos. I don't always drink Dos Equis. Is that what he says? But when I do, you guys know what I'm talking about. Yeah, that guy. Yeah, you guys know who I'm talking about. All right, let's get to this story here. If you did not see the Soho Forum debate between Glenn Greenwald and Alan Dershowitz, I thought it was pretty base. And I'm not exaggerating when I say Glenn Greenwald destroyed Alan Dershowitz. He really did. But you don't have to hear that from me. You can see it here yourself. This is a part of Glenn Greenwald's opening statement. Let's go ahead and bring this up here. Oh my God, I really don't think Alan was ready for this one.
Quote, I had dinner the other night with the Shah of Iran's son, the Crown Prince of Iran, the man who would turn Iran into a democracy if the people of Iran were allowed to vote and return the Shah's family to the rule. But it's not going to happen if the United States does not do a regime change on Iran. So it's not that he just wants a regime change operation on Iran. He wants to reinstall the Shah of Iran's son in the name of spreading democracy and freedom to Iran, just like we did to Afghanistan, just like we did to Vietnam, just like we did to Iraq. And you see what happened there. This is exactly the same propaganda, the exact same mentality, the exact same interest at work. Now, just to remind you, to say that I'm going to return democracy to Iran by reinstalling the regime of the Shah's family, of the Pahlavi regime and dynasty, is like saying, oh, I want to bring freedom and democracy to the world by making Mohammed bin Salman not just the head of Saudi Arabia, but of the entire world. The whole way that the Shah of Iran was installed in the first place was that the Iranians had a democratically elected government that the United States didn't and the West didn't like because it was becoming too nationalistic. It was threatening to nationalize oil reserves and use the proceeds for the benefit of the American people. The CIA overthrew that democratically elected government and planted one of the most brutal and savage dictators the world has ever seen, which is the Shah of Iran, who killed and murdered and put into prison every single dissident and ran that country with an iron fist until there was a revolution in 1979. That is what's really going on here. The reason people like Alan Dershowitz and the CIA in the West wanted to install the Shah and love the Shah and want to return the Shah into Iran isn't because they love democracy and want to spread democracy to the Middle East. It's because the Shah of Iran was a very close ally of Israel and a very close puppet, a very obedient puppet of the United States. And that is what this entire Middle East framework is about, is taking out the leaders who are democratically elected, making sure that the people of the Middle East have no say whatsoever by imposing dictators on those countries which we support and prop up, as we're doing in Saudi Arabia and Egypt and the United Arab Emirates and Qatar and Jordan. They want to turn the Middle East into all of that, where there's nothing but puppets of the United States that are very subservient to Israel. That is the real image, in his own words. He's saying, what I really want is regime change, and I want to reinstall the Shah of Iran into that country in order to spread democracy. Now, let me just
pause for a second. This is a very important point here that Glenn makes, because we can argue the same thing about Gaddafi, right? Like, Barack Obama made this claim that, well, Gaddafi is killing his own people, and no, Gaddafi wanted to move away from Western powers. Gaddafi wanted to basically make Africa a place where they didn't have to depend on any type of Western powers, right? So that is a no-no for the West. That's a no-no for the United States government. And not even just when he's talking about Iran, but all these other countries that the U.S. government has tried to overthrow their leaders. We talk about when it comes to Russia, you think the United States government wants Vladimir Putin in office? No, they want someone in office that is leading Russia that they can actually control. That's what they want. And if that person does not exist, they will create that person. Joe Biden told you himself many years ago, if there wasn't an Israel, we would create one. They want someone in there that's going to do their bidding, that is going to support and back Israel. And a lot of this goes back to oil and resources that are in the area. This is another reason why I continue to say we need to move away from our dependence on oil and some of these other resources. And that could stop a lot of these things. But as long as we are still depending on that, that isn't going to change anything. But the U.S. government wants to have control. You think the U.S. government wants regime change in Iran because they care about the Iranian people? They don't care about the Iranian people. They just want to have control over the resources. And their best way of having that is to make sure that Israel is the one that's in power, and all the other nations that are in the Middle East are aligned and support Israel as well.
Make a couple of points about a couple of the propagandistic visions that Professor Dershowitz presented. The first one is he wants you to think that we're right around the corner from having another Hitler, another Nazi Germany, and therefore you should make all your decisions based on what we wish we would have done prior to the emergence of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. When I first stopped being a lawyer and began writing about politics in 2005, one of the very first things I noticed was how it seems like our pundit class, our policymaking class, our political class knows only one historical example. It's like they didn't learn anything about history except 1938, Neville Chamberlain, Winston Churchill, and the Nazis. And so everything they want you to believe always should be decided through the scope of the Nazis are coming, Hitler has returned. Now, there's a phrase in law, which I'm sure Professor Dershowitz at Harvard has taught his students, that says bad cases make bad law. In other words, if you're deciding everything based on some extreme case that's very uncommon, you're going to make very bad decisions for other cases that are more common. We have been told over the past 30 years that every single leader we want to go to war with is the new Hitler. We heard that about Saddam Hussein. We heard that about Ho Chi Minh. We heard that about Assad. We heard that about Gaddafi. We hear now that about Hamas, that Hamas is worse than the Nazis or worse than ISIS. We've heard that about Muammar Ahmadinejad, who, if you probably don't remember that Hitler, he was the one who left after serving 2 terms, which the Constitution required. This is the standard propagandistic framework they always tell to you to scare you into thinking that the new Hitler is about to come and therefore we have to take action. But what makes Hitler Hitler, what makes the Nazis Nazis, is that it was a singular evil, unlike things we've seen in history either before or since. And so to let our government or pundits or warmongers scare us all the time into believing that the new Hitler is coming, we're again facing Nazi Germany, is to make extremely bad decisions, always in favor of war, because of course, who wouldn't want to go kill Hitler before he became Hitler? And that's what they want you to think, but that's not actually what we're facing. Now, as far as the claim that, oh, well, we can't wait for proof because the only proof that we're going to have is when Iran finally gets the nuclear bomb, that should be very familiar to anybody above the age of 30, because that is what we were told before the Iraq War when people like Condoleezza Rice were asked, well, where's the evidence of all these nuclear weapons that you say Saddam Hussein has? She said, we can't wait for the proof to be in the form of a smoke cloud, of a nuclear cloud over the United States. So that was what they were saying was, oh, we don't have any evidence that Iran has nuclear weapons. We don't have any evidence that they're going to use them, but we can't wait. We have to do preventive war, which was a brand new concept for Iraq that he now wants to bring back for Iran. Prior to the war in Iraq, there was no such thing as preventive war. There was preemptive war, meaning if a country was on the verge of attacking you, you had the right to attack them. Obviously, Iraq wasn't on the verge of attacking the United States in 2002 and 2003, so they invented a new term called preventive war that allowed the United States to go into Iraq, one of the worst foreign policy disasters in the history of our country. And I would simply ask you whether you want to repeat that, because everything that he just got done saying is what we were told in 2002 and 2003 and so many other times.
Let's pause for a second. Yes, this is incredibly true. I remember the lie about the Iraq war. Remember how we were lied to. Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction, which was a complete lie, but everybody bought it up. Maybe not everybody. There were some people who were protesting against the Iraq war, but I don't think people were as aware as they are now with foreign policy decisions, particularly when it comes to what's happening in Gaza. I think more people are aware. And I think that's what shocked a lot of our politicians, particularly the Biden administration. Remember what they said. They weren't prepared for this type of pushback towards the United States government giving Israel these weapons. They weren't prepared for that. They weren't prepared for all those protests. They didn't expect that to happen. But people have really woken up when it comes to foreign policy and the role that the U.S. government has to play in it. But again, to Glenn's point, we're hearing the same talking points all over again. We have to do this to protect democracy. First of all, a lot of these people can't even tell you what democracy really means. We don't even have true democracy in the United States. How do you have true democracy? And you can't even really, for the most part, depending on where you live, there are voting machines that don't even work right. If you're in an area that has voting machines, look at what they do to third-party candidates just to get on the ballot. A lot of these candidates are bought and paid for by Wall Street, the military-industrial complex, AIPAC, sometimes all three. So do we really have real democracy in this country? You don't even have a say, depending on what state you live in. You don't even have a say over your own body, depending on what state you live in. But we have a true democracy in this country, and people just aren't buying it anymore.
As well, including in Syria and in Libya. Now, it's not just Professor Dershowitz who wants regime change in Iran. It's also the government of Israel. We have this amazing coincidence in our foreign policy over the last 20 years that we keep getting told that we, the United States and Americans, have to go to war just totally coincidentally against all of Israel's worst enemies. So we went to war against Saddam Hussein, who Israel hated so much that they actually worked with and armed the Iranians in their war against Iraq. We tried to pull President Assad, Bashar al-Assad, out of Syria, who the Israelis saw as an extension of Iran. We ended up fighting on the same side as al-Qaeda and ISIS to do so. We failed. We left that country in complete destruction. We were told that we have to remove Gaddafi in Libya, even though we had partnered with him for so long, because he was one of the most pro-Palestinian voices in the region. We did actually remove Gaddafi from power, even though President Obama swore that the purpose of the war was simply to protect the people of Benghazi. It had nothing to do with regime change, and we got that leader out as well. So in 2021, according to the Times of Israel, it reported the following, quote, Defense Minister of Israel Benny Gantz and Mossad Chief David Barnera will push during their meetings this week in Washington with senior Biden administration officials for the United States to carry out a military strike on Iranian targets, Israel's three main TV news broadcasts reported Saturday night. So on some level, I would argue that just bombing Iran is not actually good for Israel's national security, but there's no world in which bombing Iran, which is what he wants our country to do, bomb Iran, having the United States bomb Iran, would actually benefit our national security as well. Now,
in fact, that would be absolutely insane. Alan Dershowitz wanting the U.S. government to bomb Iran, that would be absolutely insane and incredibly dangerous. Okay, because we know that Iran has powerful weapons. That is just bizarre. But that's how far gone Alan Dershowitz really is.
Let me just remind you of all the different times over the past, say, 20 years that we have heard over and over everything about Iran that Professor Dershowitz is trying to scare you into believing that they're just about to get nuclear weapons, they're weeks away, they're months away, we have to go bomb them. This is not something that only began recently. In fact, we've been hearing this exact same thing for 20 years and none of it ever came true. So you should decide tonight whether there's any reason after hearing this for 20 years, you're now suddenly willing to believe that Iran is on the verge of getting nuclear weapons to the point that we have to go start a new war with Iran.
This is what they do, guys, and we'll get back to Glenn. This is what they do. They find a way to make you fearful of that country. And then once you become fearful of it, when they start to, champion some type of war against them, then you're already approving of it because they have spent years trying to basically brainwash you into believing that we have to go after these countries without doing any research on your own, without trying to question what our government has been telling us, without questioning what mainstream media has been telling us. It is very important that we do our own research. And I've said this before, look up what I say too. Shit, I'm not perfect. Sometimes I come on here and I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, I have to correct something. So as long as they can make you afraid, as long as they can make you fearful, then it's a lot easier to convince you to support the U.S. government starting these wars. But if they can't convince you, that means that they haven't made you afraid of that country. And that's something that I think scares them the most. The fact that you may actually start to think for yourself.
Jeffrey Goldberg, who's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic and a strong supporter of Israel, wrote a cover story for The Atlantic called The Point of No Return in 2010, where he told Americans it was more than 50% likely that the Israelis were about to go bomb Iran in the next 3 months because they didn't have more than months before Iran finally acquired a nuclear weapon. You can go all the way back to 2005, where NBC News reported the following. This is 2005, 20 years ago, quote, Israel should take, quote, bold and courageous action against arch-foe Iran's nuclear program, similar to its 1981 strike on the main Iraqi reactor, former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday. Israeli officials have said that unless stopped, Iran will achieve the know-how to build a bomb by March of next year. In 2010, Jeffrey Goldberg said, based on my conversations with Israeli decision makers, in Israel, we heard this as 9 months from June. In other words, March of 2011, that's all Israel has. If we assume that nothing changes in these estimates, this will mean we have to begin thinking about our next step beginning at the turn of the year. The New York Times in 2012, President Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel told the UN that Iran's capability to enrich uranium must be stopped before next spring or early summer, arguing that by the time the country will be in a position to make a short, undetectable sprint to manufacture nuclear weapons. Reuters in 2015, CBS in 2018, BBC in 2019, all say exactly the same thing. Oh, we're only months away. We have for sure these intelligence photos with a big red arrow pointing at some random building that we have discovered is where Iran is about to proliferate their nuclear weapons. It's been happening over and over that you've been lied to for 20 years. Why would you suddenly believe it and support a new war against a country that's 3 times as large as Iraq, risking all of the major escalation and instability and huge war that we know will happen?
I said the same thing when the war with Russia and Ukraine started. I was just like, is no one going to question what the U.S. government is telling us, what the media is telling us? At the beginning, at the start of this, the media wasn't even talking about what happened in 2014. They weren't talking about the fact that this was basically a proxy war brought on by NATO. And this is exactly what the U.S. government wanted to happen. They want people like Vladimir Putin out of power. They want Russia to be, I guess, in a way, neutralized. Same thing with China. Why do you think they're trying to provoke China? These are 2 countries that economically are competitors for the United States, and the United States government does not want that. So they try to find ways to provoke. Nancy Pelosi going to Taiwan is provoking China. Ed Markey going to Taiwan when Taiwan is asking for independence, even though we have a one China policy rule, is provoking China. So they do these things that a lot of times you just don't hear about on mainstream media because they don't make it a headline. And then Americans are surprised, like, oh my God, we're at conflict with this country now. When a lot of times we're the ones that are provoking it.
Now, if you want Iran not to build a nuclear weapon, there is a very easy way to do that, which is to signal to them that the safest way for them to reintegrate into the international community is by agreeing not to build a nuclear weapon in exchange for having sanctions lifted. That was the Iran deal that President Obama did in 2015. And according to the Congressional Research Service, in April of 2024, just a month ago, when he was telling Newsmax what he really wants is a regime change in Iran, they documented how during the entire Iran deal, when sanctions were lifted, Iran never took any steps to build a nuclear weapon beyond what they were allowed to do. They had everything open to inspectors. They were always doing exactly what that agreement called for. And it was only once that deal was terminated, which the Israelis and many Israel supporters in the United States urged President Trump to do, did we begin again hearing that they were close to nuclear weapons. The 1981 example that he cites often about when Israel bombed Saddam Hussein and the Iraqi reactor is the perfect example. Prior to 1981, there was almost no evidence Saddam Hussein had an active nuclear program. It was a very vague aspiration. What drove Iraq to try and get nuclear weapons was precisely the fact that Israel attacked them. That's the message we send to the world all the time.
Once again, who was the aggressor? So you see, even with that particular situation, Israel was the aggressor. Let's get to the part here where Dershowitz responds. Let's go ahead and bring Alan Dershowitz in here. Let me back up just a little bit.
7.5 minutes of rebuttal. 7.5 minutes of rebuttal from Alan Dershowitz. Take it away, Alan.
Watch this. So he forgot to pick up the mic.
Israel succeeded in its attacks on both the Iraqi and the Syrian nuclear reactors with minimal casualties, and neither Syria nor Iraq has continued to develop nuclear weapons. The Middle East is a lot safer because of Israel's surgical attacks, careful attacks, very, very cautious attacks on both Iraq and Syria's nuclear reactors.
To answer that question, I don't know. Tlaib, why isn't he standing? I was wondering the same thing. I'm not sure. I know Glenn went up to the podium. I don't know why he's not standing up.
I would love to see Israel be able to cooperate with Iran and work out a deal and try to avoid them getting nuclear weapons or a nuclear arsenal without an attack. That would be far, far better. But it's just not going to happen. And there are some very, very thoughtful people who now honestly believe that Iran is just months away from having a nuclear arsenal and enough bombs to destroy Israel. And
so here comes the fear mongering, folks. So here's Alan Dershowitz trying to make people afraid that Iran is going to try to get these weapons so that they can destroy Israel. Question for you, Alan. If this Iron Dome is so effective that you say that it is, why are you concerned? I thought this Iron Dome can hold up and stop anything, right? Apparently not. 2, I highly doubt that. I think that if Iran wanted to do that, they would have done that by now. Don't you guys think they would have already done that? Listen to the way that he is framing this. Here comes the fear mongering, trying to make you afraid that this is something that Iran is planning to do. Iran was pretty public about their intentions, right? After Israel again hit the Iranian embassy in Damascus, again, Israel was the aggressor. So Alan Dershowitz, what he seems to think is okay, and a lot of Zionists think this is okay, that Israel can just continue to poke the bear. They can always hit first, but they don't want you to hit back. So Israel is the kid on the playground that wants to punch you and run away. But the moment you try to fight back and they punch you and you decide to slap them or knock them the fuck out, you're the problem. Israel is the bully on the playground that cries when you hit them back.
Of course, we know that Iran operates through surrogates. It operates through far less responsible organizations such as Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis and others. And the idea that any of them would get nuclear weapons is so potentially disturbing to world peace that it's worth at least considering what the realistic options are. If Iran does develop a nuclear arsenal, it will change everything in the Middle East. It will change everything in the world. And remember, because Iran is a theocracy, which bases its decisions on the leaders of the Ayatollah, a kind of cataclysmic approach, which focuses more on the world to come than on this world, is not beyond the realm of dispute. And the question is a question of probabilities. Nobody knows for absolute certain. Nobody knows with any degree of prophecy. You know, the Bible says that, or the Talmud says the prophecy ended with the destruction of the Second Temple. And so we're left with a world of probabilities. And one has to ask what the worst probabilities are. And
why are we referring to biblical text or, whatever type of religious text that you believe in? Why are we using that as a reference for debate? When I participated in debate in high school, we were not allowed to use religion to support our arguments. There were a couple of things you could not do, but one that I remember specifically was religion. Religion is a belief. And some people may not like to hear that, but religion is a belief. It's what you believe. So Alan Dershowitz should not be using religious text to back his argument. That goes to show you just how much Glenn basically demolished him with his own argument. Whenever you have to resort back to, the Talmud says, or such and such says this in the book, that is a belief. You don't know that to be fact. And you can fight me on this. I grew up in the church, but the reality is you do not know that to be fact.
And the question is, what would be worse? A preventive attack on a nascent Iranian a nuclear arsenal, or leaving it alone and allowing Iran to develop a nuclear arsenal, which would change everything in the Middle East. We heard my distinguished opponent talk about how many times Israel thought about bombing Iran, but they've never done it. They've never done it, not because they didn't have the capacity to do it, but they were waiting for a much higher level of certainty. And
Oh, so you speak for Iran now, Dershowitz? You know so much about how they feel and what they wanted. I love this, Saul. We're giving you shout out here. Saul said Glenn is doing his taxes.
Much higher ability to do to Iran what they did to Iraq and Syria, and that is to destroy the nuclear potential without endangering civilians. For example, in Iraq, I think one civilian died. An Egyptian who was not, I'm sorry, a French technician who was not supposed to be at the Osiris reactor. It was on a Saturday or something like that, or a Friday when they were supposed to be home, and accidentally he was there. And if it didn't totally destroy, it set back the Iraqi nuclear program for many years. In fact, it's never been renewed again. And so it is a question of probabilities. And yes, I favor regime change in Iran. Iran is the most dangerous country in the modern world.
No, that would be Israel, hon. Everybody's dangerous except for the countries that the U.S. tells you that are not. Iran is dangerous. Russia's dangerous. China's dangerous. You know, anyone that doesn't go along with this puppetry of the United States government is considered to be dangerous. You know, at one point they were like, Saddam was dangerous. Iraq is dangerous. Everything the U.S. tells you is dangerous. But the United States is never dangerous, even though they have implemented coups in other countries. The countries they tell you to be afraid of, like Venezuela. The United States government implemented coups in Venezuela. Anya Parampil wrote a whole book about it. Go read it. So there's that. Haiti's dangerous. Oh no, there's gangs in Haiti. Watch out for Haiti. It's dangerous. We have to do something now. Everyone's dangerous except for Israel and the United States government. Israel has led an assault on a population of people, an ethnic assault on a population of people. And for all the rhetoric that comes out of Netanyahu's mouth, he has no room to really talk. Netanyahu isn't even from there. He's a settler. Make it clear, folks. That's not even his name. Richie Medhurst did a whole video about this. That's not his name. He changed his name so that you would think he grew up there. He didn't grow up there. So everybody's dangerous except for the settler nation. Make it make sense.
It is the modern day Nazi Germany, and the potential for Iran using its aggressive behavior, which it now assigns to surrogates, and doing it in a more direct, effective way. Remember that Iran sent hundreds of missiles to Israel just a few weeks ago. Imagine if a half a dozen of them were nuclear tipped. Every country has the right of self-defense, and regime change would be good for the vast majority of Iranians want regime change. The only reason there is Ayatollah regime in Iran is because it's a despotic regime. It's the furthest thing in the world from democracy. And so if the Iranian regime could be changed, look, I don't want the Shah, I don't want anybody close to the Shah to be the leader of Iran, but you have to choose between evils, and you have to choose the lesser of the evils. And I have to tell you, the Iranian regime was less bad on a scale of really bad under the Shah of Iran, and it would be much, much less bad under his far more liberal and far more accommodating son.
So let's pause there and we'll get to Glenn's rebuttal here in just a second. It's funny, it does look like Glenn is doing his taxes. But anyway, one thing that I wanted to add in reference to what he said about the nuclear weapons, notice how this is framed as well. Because you see, Alan Dershowitz isn't against Israel having any type of nuclear weapons. It's only other countries that they feel should not have them that are particularly not aligned with Israel and the United States government. So it's a problem for Russia to have them. It's a problem for Iran to have them, but it's not a problem for Israel to have them. I say the best way that you can solve this argument is to get rid of all nuclear weapons, period. We shouldn't have nuclear weapons at all, because they are incredibly dangerous. But you don't get to pick and choose If you do have them, you don't get to pick and choose which country can happen, what countries can't have them. That's dangerous. Let's fast forward to the piece here where Glenn comes in with the rebuttal right about here. Yeah.
And the action that I advocate we should take.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah.
Yeah, so again, I don't know why he has to.
7.5 minutes from Glenn. Take it away, Glenn.
Yeah, so Glenn stands up at the podium. I don't know why Dershowitz is not standing up. I don't know.
So one of the first things that I noticed Professor Dershowitz saying near the beginning of his rebuttal there was, well, it would be nice to have an agreement with Iran, but unfortunately, it will never happen. And I thought that was so odd because it actually did happen, not 100 years ago, but 7 years ago. It was the Iran deal that the United States and Western Europe entered into with Iran to reintegrate Iran into the international community in exchange for Iran opening up its nuclear facilities. Think about what you would think if you were a leader. Would you want nuclear weapons more if you felt like you were in danger of being bombed and attacked and having people like Alan Dershowitz talking for the last 20 years about how important it is to bomb you within the next few weeks? Wouldn't you think, oh, I better get nuclear weapons? And wouldn't you feel like maybe you don't need nuclear weapons if you're actually entering deals that you don't renege on, but that the United States did? So that was a deal. And I read you the Congressional Service Report that said during the time of that deal, there was no movement at all on Iran's nuclear program. In fact, this is from the Brookings Institution, which supported the war in Iraq, has always supported multiple wars in the Middle East. And this is what they say in December 2021, why bombing Iran is still a bad idea. Quote, retired Israeli General Isaac Ben Israel told Bloomberg that, quote, Netanyahu's efforts to persuade the Trump administration to quit the nuclear agreement with Iran has turned out to be the worst strategic mistake in Israel's history. With this statement, General Ben Israel admitted that not only did Israel undermine its own security by pushing for Trump to renege on the agreement, but also that Israel undermined America's security, as both countries share an interest in preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Such behavior is unacceptable from a partner. Unfortunately, Iran's current minister, Naftali Bennett, is adopting much of the same posture on Iran as Netanyahu. And here's what they say will happen if you vote for bombing Iran. Quote, an Israeli strike on Iran or a U.S. strike on Iran, quote, will likely start a conflict that pulls in neighboring countries on both sides. Hezbollah will launch thousands of rockets, missiles, and drones at Haifa, Tel Aviv, and other targets. Hamas might also join the conflict. Iran or its Iraqi and Yemeni partners could strike Saudi Arabia as they have in the past. They might also expand attacks to include Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates, given their now publicly normalized ties with Israel. Oman, Kuwait, and Qatar, which have tended to maintain relations with both Israel and the rest of the United States, will be pressed to choose a side, a decision that will subject them to attack from their new adversaries. Jordan would be in a grave bind given the enormous popular pressure to break the peace treaty with Israel. Oil prices would skyrocket. Does that sound like something we all want? This conflagration in the Middle East of the kind we saw when the people who said the same thing about Iraq got their way? Now, again, Professor Dershowitz returned to this idea that, oh, the Iranians are Nazis. I guess, I don't know if Assad is still the new Hitler. I don't know if Gaddafi's still the new Hitler. If Ahmadinejad, who was not even part of Iran's government anymore, is the new Hitler. I don't know if Putin is the new Hitler. But Iran, he says, is the real new Nazis, and you have to treat them that way. What evidence is there that Iran is some crazy apocalyptic country that goes around murdering and slaughtering and committing genocide? They have certainly done bad acts, and Professor Dershowitz went over them. But the death count responsible that the United States and Israel is responsible for dwarfs whatever number of people Iran has killed.
This is very important right here. This piece that Glenn is saying is very important because at the end of the day, when you think about it, I told you, they continue to pick on a population of people that has actually done less harm than Israel has done. They blame Hamas for the greatest atrocity in the world that happened on October 7th. Meanwhile, Israel's killed over 4,000 people and thousands of children. But that's not a great atrocity because Israel did it, right? So he blames Iran. Dershowitz blames Iran and says, oh, no, they're basically the new Hitler, I don't remember Iran committing ethnic genocide, trying to, cleanse like an entire group of people. I don't remember those things happening. This is not to say Iran is innocent, but I don't remember them doing these things. Meanwhile, you have Israel actively trying to ethnically cleanse the land. So again, what I've noticed time and time over and over again when it comes to Zionism is that a lot of times these accusations that they make against other populations, it's actually what they're doing. Everyone, pay attention to it.
Iran has shown over and over that they can be rationally negotiated with. They're not some crazed apocalyptic cult. When Israel bombed their embassy in Syria, they didn't go all out and try and attack Israel the way many countries would. They used some of their slowest and most harmless drones that they knew would be intercepted as a show of symbolic force. There's no evidence that Iran is out there invading other countries, bombing other countries, trying to bring a genocide or a new Holocaust. In fact, in 2018, there was a UN General Assembly resolution that simply called for the, quote, establishment of a nuclear weapon-free zone in the region of the Middle East. All 171 countries voted in favor of a nuclear-free Middle East. You'll never guess which were the only two no votes in the entire world. Oh, it's the US and Israel.
Because the US and Israel wants to be the ones in power. That is why. You can watch the rest of this debate on Reason on YouTube. Glenn Greenwald and Alan Dershowitz debate bombing Iran. I think there's one more piece. There was one more discussion here. Do I have it? Yes, this part. I did share this one on Twitter where I said Glenn Greenwald is destroying Alan Dershowitz in this debate. Listen to this one. This is where Glenn calls out the media. This is good.
That Iran did not want to kill Israelis, that it sent these hundreds of drones knowing they would all be miraculously stopped. Can you justify that?
Yeah, what I want to say is if Iran has such a primitive army that they're not capable of landing even a single missile inside Israel because all they have is a bunch of crappy drones and slow missiles that can be removed from the sky by Jordan and by the United Arab Emirates, then they're hardly an imposing country. The reality is that Hezbollah...
All you need is one to get through.
Alan, please.
One.
Hezbollah has hundreds of, tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of highly sophisticated missiles pointed directly at every single major Israeli city, including Tel Aviv. If Iran wanted to do a kind of response against Israel that you're suggesting they wanted, they had that capability and they didn't because they're a rational, restrained country that didn't want to end up in a world war. I know. The only rational, restrained countries are America, Israel, and the West. That's what your media tells you all the time, so I know that you believe that. But there are actually other rational, restrained countries in the world, too. You're always told there's a new Hitler in Iran, there's a new Hitler in Russia, there's a new Hitler named Hamas, there's a new Hitler in Syria, and you believe it all the time, and you stand up and you cheer all those evil, irrational countries. As I said, if you look at who the ones are who are starting wars, it is your country, the United States, and along with Israel as well. And that is just the reality if you remove yourself from Western propaganda.
So he related it to the media, and that's very important. And I'll tell you something else in reference to so-and-so is the new Hitler. Notice you didn't hear the media say that about Ukraine, even though there was actually a letter that was signed by Congress members in Congress in 2018. Look this up, April 2018, congressional members, one of them being Ro Khanna, signed this letter saying that they were very concerned about the Nazification in Ukraine and Poland. So put two and two together, folks. So when the war happens with Russia and Ukraine, and Russia talks about the Nazification in Ukraine, notice that mainstream media didn't even want to tell you about the Nazification and the Azov Battalion, but not that it's just with the Azov Battalion, but also that it's throughout the freaking country. This is something that some people on the left got wrong. They got it wrong from day one because there were personalities that they didn't like. And so they were like, well, I don't want to agree with that person, instead of looking into that information itself. For the people who told you it was just a small amount of people that were, no, it is embedded in the culture. Embedded in the culture. And I know this having had students who were from Ukraine that explained this to me. Okay. But you'll never hear mainstream media. They didn't want to tell you that, though. So if they're telling you that there is a rise of a new Hitler for another country, chances are it's probably not that country. And the countries that they're cheerleading, maybe those are the ones that you should look a little bit deeper into. But Glenn killed him. Well done. Let's get to the comments over here. Thank you, Gilbert. I don't usually drink, but when I do, it's Dos Equis. That guy. Thank you. Thank you, John. I prefer Negra Modella or Bohemia. Dos Equis Amber is not bad. I think I had that one on Cinco de Mayo one year. Dos Equis Amber. I don't know about Modella. I don't think I've tried that one. Thank you, Ristos. Glenn has a unique way of dismantling all the BS. Mm-hmm. And thank you for this as well. Good on you, Sabby, true fighter. Thank you so much. The Oracle, Sabby, the mainstream media is precious, more than a midwife and handmaiding delivering the state narrative. Yeah. Imagine if they told the truth about the war with Russia and Ukraine, if they talked about what happened in 2014, if they talked about these coups, the American people would be more awake. Yet I saw everybody like buying into this, people walking around, Black people walking around, waving Ukraine flags. I'm like, do you know what you're supporting? Thank you, Sparky. Before the 1967 war, Egypt managed Gaza as they were tasked by the UN. Perhaps when the smoke clears, Egypt will be tasked with managing Gaza as Palestinians rebuild while Israel collapses. We'll have to see. Thank you, Cynical. They debating regime change right in front of us. Yeah. Thank you, Sparky. After World War II, the Allies gave part of Germany to Poland. Why didn't they give part of Germany to European Jews? We've been asking this question. We've been asking that question. That's a good one. Instead of imposing them on far off Palestine, Yiddish and German are mutually intelligible. I think it has something to do with the fact that that is supposed to be the Holy Land or whatever. Again, that's religion. Religion is based on a belief. YZ, you should, or they should invite Professor Morandi and Professor Finkelstein. Yeah, that would be a good conversation too. Thank you for this, John. Yes, we need to keep asking which side has done the most killing. Thank you for that. And thank you, Sparky. Glenn completely brutalized Dershowitz. Thank you for that. All right. And I'll take that comment on Rockfin, Eric. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Roger, for the tip on Rockfin. That was all before mobile internetworking combined with social media, Sabby. Shit's changed. They can bring Hammer down on TikTok all they want, but another will pop up. Can't suppress all info. This is truly an information war where our government has declared war on its people. A democracy can only be real when all citizens have the power to put their own amendments on the ballot to ratify themselves. Very good points there, Roger. And thank you so much for the tip on Rockfin JVB. Sabby, you are perfect most of the time. Keep it up. Thank you. I don't think I'm perfect, but I try to get it right. I try. All right. And we're moving on to, we'll start Ohio. All right. So one of the ways that you can have a little bit of control over your vote is through direct democracy. So ballot initiatives, ballot measures, we talk about that quite a bit on this show. And we have now moved on to Ohio, interesting state. So we're starting Ohio tonight. Ballot measure results for 2023. We're getting closer and closer to covering the ballot measures that will be on the ballot this November. So we should start covering those, I believe, late June. But for now, Ohio's results from 2023. So let's explain how initiatives work in Ohio. Citizens of Ohio may initiate state statutes, aka state laws, through the process of indirect initiative, meaning after a successful petition drive makes a stop at the Ohio legislature, to give them a chance to adopt, to pass, or reject, then goes to the ballot for voters to weigh in on. Once sufficient signatures have been collected, statutory initiatives are first presented to the Ohio General Assembly. If approved, petitioners may collect an additional round of signatures within 90 days in order to place the statute on the ballot. That second round of signature collection transitions from indirect initiative to direct initiative. Citizens of Ohio may also initiate constitutional amendments through the process of direct initiative, where a successful petition drive, proposed amendments proceed directly to the ballot for a vote of the people. The General Assembly may also propose amendments to the people as legislatively referred constitutional amendments. Now, Ohio does have a single subject rule. The single subject rule in Ohio, proposed measures must address only one subject. The Ohio Revised Code further clarifies this requirement by stating only one proposal of law or constitutional amendment to be proposed by initiative petition shall be contained in an initiative petition to enable the voters to vote on that proposal separately. If a measure is found to propose more than one statute or amendment, the Ohio Ballot Board may divide the measure into separate ballot questions. Let me break that down for you in another way. So you cannot have a ballot measure in Ohio that basically contains two subject matters. So let's say I wanted to have a ballot measure for, let's say, expanding Medicaid or something like that in Ohio. And I wanted to actually pair that with creating public banks or something like that. Those would have to be two separate measures. You can't have that as one. Roger actually has a note here about monopolies in Ohio. He says, Sabby, this is pure genius and unique in and of itself. He said he'll add it to his CBI recipe. It says here that Section 1E of Article 2 of the Ohio Constitution gives a restriction on initiatives that institute monopolies or special privileges. The Ohio Ballot Board is required to investigate any proposed initiative and determine if it would create an economic monopoly or special privilege for any non-public entity, including individuals, corporations, and organizations. That's actually huge. That's pretty cool. If the Ohio Ballot Board determines that an initiative would create such a monopoly or special privilege, two questions must be put on the ballot. The first one must ask, let's get down here. Sorry. Shall the petitioner in violation of this division be authorized to initiate a constitutional amendment that grants or creates a monopoly, oligopoly, or cartel, specifies or determines a tax rate or confers a commercial interest, commercial right, or commercial license that is not available to other similarly situated positions? The second question must provide a summary of the proposed initiative and ask voters if they wish to approve it. Both questions must receive majority approval for the initiative to be enacted. That is good. Competing initiatives, Ohio law provides that in the event that conflicting measures are approved, the measure with the most affirmative votes takes effect. The other measure does not become law. I usually don't cover the number of signatures to get on the ballot because we've covered this time and time again. We can always look at that later as we go into this year. But I want to go ahead and get to that first. Oh, this part is important. I'm sorry. Deadlines for collection. Ohio law does not limit how long a petition may be circulated. That's huge when you compare that to other states. And then I want to get to the first initiative here, which failed. An Ohio proposal asked voters during an August special election to boost the threshold for passing constitutional amendments to 60% rather than a simple majority. It would also double the number of counties where signatures must be collected, adding an extra layer of difficulty to qualifying initiatives for the ballot. They tried to pass this in South Dakota in 2022, and I covered that as well. This is sneaky and it's a trick because what the state is trying to do, they're trying to make it more difficult for ballot initiatives to pass in that state. When they tell you you need to have a 60% approval instead of a majority, that means if you had a ballot measure for, let's go back to expanding Medicaid or something like that, and let's say 55% of the people voted for it, because it's not 60% of the people, it still wouldn't pass. See, they think they're sneaky. That's them trying to be sneaky. So they tried to do that in South Dakota. It also failed there as well. And it has failed here in Ohio by 57.11%. And that was Ohio issue 1, 60% vote requirement to approve constitutional amendments measure. That was on the ballot August 8th, 2023, and it was defeated. So shout out to that, because again, we don't want that 60% to pass, and other states are trying to sneak this one by too. So you really have to pay attention, guys. If you're in a ballot measure state, if you see that one pop up, you do not want to vote in favor of that 60% requirement instead of majority rule. Sneaky little fuckers. Oh, sorry. Excuse my language. That was a little bad. Sorry. Who supported this? So mainly Republicans, right? So Governor Richard DeWine, Matt Huffman, Robert McCauley, Jason Stevens, some of the organizations that supported it: Ohio Chamber of Commerce, of course, they represent businesses, Ohio Hotel and Lodging Association. So you see this, Right to Life, Restaurant Association, etc. One of the arguments from State Senator Matt Huffman: when the initiative was passed 100 years ago, the idea was that citizens of the state would rise up because the legislature wouldn't act. I think big changes to the Constitution should have a more difficult standard. Yeah. So in other words, Matt Huffman there doesn't want to make it so that it would be easier for citizens in Ohio to disrupt business, because that's what a lot of that is about. Like, a lot of these ballot measures do disrupt big business in some way, shape, or form. All about money. Who opposed it? Of course, majority Democrat politicians, and you'll see former officials that opposed it. All Democrats except for former Governor John Kasich. He also opposed it. Political parties that opposed it: the Libertarian Party of Ohio and the Working Families Party. The unions opposed it: Ohio AFL-CIO, the teachers, auto workers, and of course, so that's the UAW, the Ohio Education Association, and organizations, the ACLU, the League of Women Voters, which needs to come back, by the way. That would change a lot in electoral politics if the League of Women Voters was a big thing again. Planned Parenthood Advocates of Ohio, Sierra Club. And one of the arguments for that is from Catherine Terser of Common Cause Ohio. It is inappropriate to cherry pick an election in August, which is likely to have poor voter turnout. For more than 100 years, Ohioans have had the right to come together, gather enough signatures, and place a proposal on the ballot. Citizen-led ballot measures aren't overused. We haven't had one on the ballot since 2018. It's unnecessary to make the process more complicated, and it's disrespectful for voters. Yes, and that is a good way of phrasing that. It is disrespectful. It's a slap in the face. Like, the majority would vote for it, and they're just like, yeah, it's about 60% though, so sorry, doesn't pass. Yeah, that's bullshit. Man, with the language tonight. Okay, and Roger wanted me to read this as well. Republican Representative Brian Stewart: all 88 counties should have a voice in determining what amendments make it on the ballot, and to eliminate the cumbersome cure period, which gives initiative petitions effectively a do-over when they fail to meet the requirements for ballot access. So that was coming from Brian Stewart. Roger added a little note here that said, seeing that the legislature is applying the same standard to the voters as they apply to themselves, where all is required is 60% of both chambers in one session to pass the amendment before putting it before the voters for ratification. That is when it comes to legislative initiative amendments. And now they're asking voters to match their high threshold standard. I would actually vote for this, except the fact that they have increased the distribution requirement to get signatures from 44 counties to all 88 counties. Either have a high threshold for voter ratification, but no distribution requirement, or have a distribution requirement, but simple majority to pass and ratify. Don't make it too hard. Don't make it too easy. I wouldn't approve the 60% at all, because they can also try to take that to another level as well. And then when we come back on Thursday, we will start with the next ballot initiative. We'll continue the ballot measures for Ohio on Thursday. So yeah, definitely check that out as well. Let's get that comment on Rockfin from Roger, and then we'll head out. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Now, this was a debate, made their points with no interruptions. Dersh should have just took the L from Norm. This ass whooping was worse. Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty bad. I watched the entire thing, so watch the full debate, but yeah, it was pretty bad. He should have just taken the L from Norm. Just take the L. All right, so we'll finish Ohio initiatives on Thursday. We also have a guest Thursday. One of the our city councilor, I believe, Thursday. Bashir will be here Thursday. He is actually one of the commencement speakers that was at Morehouse that I guess had some things to say. So he will be here. We'll finish Ohio initiatives and more news. And Friday, Danny Haifong will be here. We have a lot to discuss. It's been a minute. But other than that, guys, I am heading out. I do have a very early start tomorrow. I have organizing meeting tomorrow. So we're not doing call in tonight. I'll try to do it again later on this week, but pretty early start tomorrow. All right, guys, that is it for me. You know how we do this. Have a good night. Keep up the fight. Yay!